Chapter 23:37. If one was not in the position, one would not be able to understand the trade-offs one was facing if one was not in the position. Even if this little emperor became the new emperor with the support of the Chen family, he still had to face the situation of the Chen family. Perhaps the empress could make the Chen family hand over their military power without bloodshed. Ning Shu grounded the empress and sent guards to guard the empress's palace. Then he went to the Empress Dowager's place to see the sick Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager could not continue coughing like this. If she continued coughing, her lungs would have problems. Although the Empress Dowager was sick, she was still very clear about the affairs of the imperial harem. Emperor Ro-er has already married into the imperial family. She is a member of the Murong family. She is your legal wife after all. If there is anything, Emperor should be more tolerant. Emperor can even take care of the world. You must be tolerant of your wife. She can't tolerate Shen. Ning Shu patted the Empress Dowager's back. Rest more. Don't worry about these things. There was a lifetime in between. There was also the matter of the Chen family. The two of them could only be a pair of lovebirds in this life. The Empress Dowager was patted on the back by Ning Shu. She felt as if there was fresh air entering her lungs. She felt much better. She said to Ning Shu, Emperor, Ijia still has the same words. I hope you can let the Chen family go. Mohu, you don't have to worry about this matter. Ning Shu said. The person who first took power still needed to create the image of a benevolent emperor. The matter of the Chen family, he was afraid that they would still be exiled. If they did not punish the Chen family, the court would not be able to maintain order. Their entire family would be executed. The name of a tyrant would be placed on the head of the person who commissioned them, especially since the Chen family had a blood relationship with the person who commissioned them. If they exterminated them, it would be hard to avoid giving people a feeling of being unreasonable. They could not be punished. They could not be punished heavily. So the method of the person who commissioned them was also feasible. The Empress Dowager grabbed Ning Shu's hand. Emperor, Ijia begs you. Ning Shu sighed. Zhen knows. Ning Shu returned to her bedroom and put away the commander's seal. Her mission should be almost complete. Now, there were a lot of soldiers guarding the Shen family. Now, the Shen family could not go out and were imprisoned. Ning Shu lay on the bed, closed his eyes, and sensed the water around the palace. Then he expanded his range and headed towards Pengzhou. He sensed many rivers. He could sense how many fish there were in the river. When he reached Pengzhou, the flood had receded, and the flowing water no longer broke through the dam. Silt was piled up in many places, and the corpses of fishes and poultry were buried underneath. Ning Shu got up from the bed and put on her clothes to write a letter to Su Chingon. Was she clairvoyant? Water was everywhere in this place. If one could sense water, they would be able to sense the situation around them. This could be considered as one of the water skills. Ning Shu asked Su Chingon to clean up the river sand and deal with the corpses inside. Cremation was the only way to prevent the outbreak of the epidemic. So many refugees had to open their mouths to eat every day. It would be good to have something to do and rationalize the use of resources. After writing a new letter, he asked Xiaolu to send someone to quickly send it over. Xiaolu replied. Ning Shu looked at Xiaolu and said, Thank you for being by my side during this period of time. Reward him with 100 taels of silver. Thank you, Your Majesty. This servant will definitely do my best until my death. Xiaolu knelt down and thanked him. I don't need you to do your best until your death. Go, send someone to quickly send it over. It was winter now, and the weather was cold. If it was summer, the corpses would rot quickly and cause an epidemic. Ning Shu did not want an epidemic to happen. Now that the treasury was empty, if something happened, they would ask for money from her. It was as if she could conjure up money. Ning Shu touched her chin. The Shen family definitely had money. Should she ask the Shen family to donate some money? They were really short on money. Ning Shu sighed and laid down on the bed to sleep. Every year there would be taxes, but every year, the treasury would be empty. Where did all the money go? She had to make good accounts. In such a big country, was there no one to keep accounts? She covered herself with the blanket. She had endless worries every day. It was not so easy to hold power. Usually, When she was tired from reviewing memorials, Ning Shu would walk around the imperial garden, look at the scenery, feed the fish, and walk around the country's treasury to see if there was anything like the world's origin. No, hadn't the world's origin been found? The world's origin was found, but it was broken. It would be best if she could get the world's origin. She could sell it for more than 100,000 merit points or power of faith. It was quite good as an extra income. However, in the treasury, there were jade, pearls, ginseng, and ganoderma, but there was no world's origin. The light and darkness attribute world's origin looked like a walnut. Ning Shu scanned the box in the room. This kind of thing must be kept by blind, but it did not seem to be. Ning Shu released her spiritual power and enveloped the entire palace. She scanned the entire palace and found many bones. In the well and in the pool, there were bones. Ning Shu. The sanitation of the palace's water source was worrying. Since ancient times, the palace had been a place of cannibalism. When a straw mat died, it was thrown out. There were also people whose bodies were not even found and were buried in the palace. In the end, even the bones rotted. Thinking of the many bones around, it was strange and uncomfortable. Ning Shu asked the palace people to fish out the bones in the well and the pool and quietly bury them. Gu Yi's system felt the spiritual power sweep past and said to Embroidery Gu Yi, "This task enforcer's spiritual power is quite strong." Gu Yi was a little surprised. Is she not an intermediate task enforcer? The system paused for a moment and said, from the looks of her means and spiritual power, she is probably not an intermediate task enforcer. Then how did she appear in the intermediate task world? Gu Yi was puzzled and gave up. Probably for the system said. Quickly finish the task and leave this world. Now that we are living in peace, it does not mean that she will not have any thoughts. But I will finish the task soon. Gu Yi nodded and said apologetically, "It's about the system. I did not know that there were other task enforcers. Next time, I will be faster and not let others snatch it. I will let you become stronger quickly." The system said and did not speak anymore. This concubine greets the emperor. Ning Shu was strolling in the imperial garden and met the beautiful Ping Fangyi. Ping Fangyi bowed to Ning Shu in a flirtatious manner. Her eyes revealed eagerness and longing that were not there before. If Ping Fangyi gave people a look of not caring about anything before, then now she was like a harem concubine who longed for the emperor's favor. Ning Shu looked at Ping Fangyi from head to toe. What was that good beauty doing? Didn't she say that she wanted to complete the task? Why was Ping Fangyi standing here now? Except that she did not have the system, Ping Fangyi was no different. She should be more efficient. Chapter 23:38. Ning Shu felt that Beauty Liang, this task enforcer, should be someone who had not been doing the task for long. She was very unfamiliar with the task, just like her. However, to be able to wander in an intermediate world, she should be an intermediate task enforcer. Emperor! Ping Fangyi saw that Ning Shu was not speaking, so she could not help but shout. Success or failure depended on this. In order to know the emperor's whereabouts, she almost spent all her savings to buy some information. Ping Fangyi felt that she had never been in such a difficult situation. After experiencing so many worlds, why did she fall into this man's hands? Despair, helplessness. She wanted to return to a peaceful and equal world, where she had food and clothes, where she did not have to worry about being beheaded by the emperor, and where she did not have to worry about being secretly harmed by the imperial concubines. Every day, she lived in fear. What made Ping Fangyi relieved was that the Empress Dowager was sick, so she did not have the energy to torment her. What's the situation in your heavenly palace? Have you exorcised the evil? Ning Shu asked. When Ping Fangyi heard this, the corner of her mouth slightly twitched. For a moment, she did not know how to explain, so she said, "Emperor." Ning Shu waited for her explanation. Ning Shu felt that the person who entrusted this task should be a very charming emperor in history. Otherwise, it would not attract so many evil ghosts and serpent gods to have a vigorous love affair with the emperor. The country was like a painting, the beauty was like a poem. How beautiful was that? Just like the cold-faced fourth brother who would not let go of a prostitute, using a burning heart to melt the iceberg. Moreover, it was an emperor's iceberg. Ning Shu asked, "What do you want to say?" It's the wind," Ping Fangyi stammered. Ning Shu seemed to believe Ping Fangyi's words. He made an sound and then did not speak. Ping Fangyi said again, "Emperor, Chinxia has brewed some plum blossom wine. Now, it's time to open the jar. Does Emperor want to taste it?" "Oh, is that so?" Ning Shu shook his head. "Zhen is busy with government affairs, so Zhen will not go. You can withdraw." An anxious expression appeared on Ping Fangyi's face. She wanted to say something, but Xiaoluzi immediately said, "Fangyi Nyang Nyang, when Emperor wants to drink wine, he will naturally go back to find you." Ping Fangyi saw Ning Shu staring at the pond. There were colorful koi fish in the pond. They were squeezed together to eat fish food, looking very carefree. Why was Guan Yu unwilling to go to her palace? Ping Fangyi turned her head 3 times with each step, and helplessly walked towards her own sleeping quarters. Ning Shu sprinkled some fish food into the pond, clapped his hands, and returned to the Xuanda Hall to review the memorials. She should have left this world. All the members of the Shen family were imprisoned in the general's residence. As for what the person who entrusted the mission would do, it was up to him. Moreover, Ning Shu was now eliminating the henchmen of the Shen family, especially the officials who had conflicts of interest with the Shen family. After meeting Ping Fangyi in the Imperial Garden, Ning Shu also met Lu Jiaoyi. "Ning Shu, wasn't she grounded?" "Your Majesty, why did you come out?" "Chinxia is going to see the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager is sick. Chinxia has to serve her." Lu Jiaoyi said, "Ning Shu, you are so filial, work hard." Lu Jiaoyi thought for a bit and said, "Your Majesty, Chinxia has something to say, but I don't know if I should say it." Ning Shu disliked this kind of opening speech the most, so he lightly said, "Since you know you shouldn't say it, then don't say it." Lu Jiaoyi was immediately choked. History said that he created the Qing dynasty and created a prosperous era, but his personality was really, "Chinxia knows that Your Majesty is a sentimental person." She was lonely, rushing forward alone, and fighting with the ministers. Ning Shu, she didn't know if the person who entrusted the mission was lonely or not, but every time this girl looked at people with an "I know you the best" expression, it was intoxicating. She only learned a little from the history books, and thought that she understood this person. She was a bit arrogant. Perhaps he was a wise ruler, but it didn't mean that he would tolerate everyone. To be honest, seeing this expression of, "I know you the best," she couldn't help but want to slap the face. "Didn't you say that you knew me the best?" Ning Shu said, "Not lonely at all. It's lonely at the top. Zhen wears more clothes." Lu Jiaoyi, that she didn't know that this person was so humorous. "Go see the Empress Dowager." Ning Shu waved his hand to Lu Jiaoyi. Lu Jiaoyi put down the food box in her hand and put the stacks of pastries on the stone table in the pavilion. "Your Majesty, this is Chinxia's newly made pastries. Have a taste." "Put it here, Zhen will eat it," Ning Shu said. Lu Jiaoyi gathered her courage and reached out to hold Ning Shu's hand that was on the stone table. "Ning Shu?" He looked down at Lu Jiaoyi's white hand on the back of his hand and was silent for a moment. Lu Jiaoyi saw that Ning Shu was in a daze and tenderness appeared in her eyes. Ning Shu took back his hand. He couldn't figure out why Lu Jiaoyi was pitying him. Lu Jiaoyi was pitying an emperor. She felt that he was very pitiful. He was the ruler of the world, very pitiful. He didn't have a confidant by his side, so pitiful and sinful. But what Lu Jiaoyi didn't understand was that she was a pitiful person. He could take her life with a single sentence. Heaven, hell, glory, splendor, wealth, a single sentence could make her life different. Why did she think that the emperor was a pitiful person? Ning Shu's biggest feeling was that Lu Jiaoyi took herself too seriously. She felt that she might be different from the rest. She could give the emperor comfort and warmth, as well as true feelings. Ning Shu held his forehead and waved his hand to let her go. As for the pastries, he was too lazy to touch them. These pastries were not as delicious as the ones in the Law City. The news that she liked to stroll around the Imperial Garden had already spread out. Now, people often came to scam her. After scamming her many times, Ning Shu stopped strolling around. During this period, Ning Shu also bumped into Ping Fangyi several times. Ping Fangyi was so lively, Ning Shu wondered if this beautiful woman was embroidering every day. Why didn't she take any action? In fact, Ning Shu really wronged the beautiful woman. The beautiful woman was from a medical family. She knew about medicine the best. Of course, she also knew about poisons. She poisoned her, but he didn't know why the beautiful woman wasn't poisoned. After discussing with her system for a while, the system felt that the beautiful woman's body should have been transformed by the system that had already left, so she was immune to poison. Since the poison didn't work, the beautiful woman had to find another way to deal with the beautiful woman. The beautiful woman scratched her head until she was bald. She couldn't think of a way to deal with Ping Fangyi without leaving any trouble for the client. After all, the client came back and had to survive in this harem. The system said, "Go visit Ping Fangyi. Don't you know hypnosis? Use hypnosis." Yes, hypnosis. The beautiful woman took out a needle and thread. Since it's a visit, I must give a gift. Embroidery? Just pick some jewelry from the makeup box. How much time would it take to embroider like this? Well, in fact, I quite like embroidery. The beautiful woman was somewhat regretful. The system didn't say a word. Chapter 2339. Ning Shu's delay in dealing with the Shun family caused a lot of criticism in the imperial court. Moreover, the empress was accused of murdering her husband. Everyone only knew what the empress did during the worship ceremony. If they knew, Empress Shun still wanted to poison the emperor. It would probably be a mess now. In an era where the husband was the leader of the wife and the monarch's orders were like the heavenly orders, the empress's actions were definitely challenging the bottom line of the scholar officials. The Chen family's matter had to be brought up again and again. Of course, there were people who wanted to fish in troubled waters. Ning Shu had dealt with a lot of corrupt officials during this period of time. The serious ones were directly removed from their positions. The less serious ones were directly demoted and transferred out of powerful departments. Therefore, some of the officials urgently wanted other things to slow down and stall for time. As an official, their buttocks were clean. There were more or less things that couldn't be seen in public. Ning Shu just emitted a sound for a while and didn't say anything. The civil and military officials of the court, "Emperor, it's not good." Outside, Xiaolu walked in like he had seen a ghost and said to Ning Shu, who was reviewing memorials. The eunuch's voice was originally very sharp, but the agitated Xiaolu raised his voice a lot and became even sharper. "What's wrong?" Ning Shu circled the memorials and reviewed them before putting down the cinnabar brush. "Ping Fangyi, Emperor, Ping Fangyi." Xiaolu couldn't say it and said, "Emperor, you should go out and take a look." Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. When he went out of Xuanda Hall to take a look, he was completely confused. He even suspected that he had gone to the wrong place. Ping Fangyi was in front of Xuanda Hall, taking off her clothes one by one. As she took them off, she picked them up. It was enchanting and beautiful. It looked like she was doing a striptease. Ning Shu wanted to scratch his head. He looked at the belt and shoes on the ground. Ping Fangyi was barefoot on the ground. Ning Shu took a deep breath. How cold was this? Was this a different way to attract attention? In the blink of an eye, Ping Fangyi had already taken off her clothes. The fur cloak that she wore outside had already fallen to the ground. She had already taken off her outer clothes. Now, only her inner clothes were left. Ping Fangyi's posture and dance were very beautiful. If this was the modern era, it would definitely be beautiful. She took off her clothes one by one. Ning Shu was speechless. "Then throw her out," Ning Shu said to Xiao Liuzi. "If you had the ability to change the rules, you could do it casually. Perhaps it would cause others to rush to imitate you." But Ping Fangyi had no way to change it now, so she had to follow the ancient feudal way of life. In the boudoir, this kind of action could be considered fun, but to do it in front of the Xuanda Hall, one's brain must be flooded with water. Although Ning Shu's voice was very loud and Ping Fangyi should stop when she heard it, she still continued to dance without fear or joy. She took off her inner clothes, revealing her bright red undergarment. With snow-white and flawless skin, Ping Fangyi did not seem to feel cold at all. She jumped up and wanted to take off her doo-doo. Hurry up and find a sack to cover her. Ning Shu rolled his eyes and said, Very good, you've successfully attracted my attention. Ning Shu stared at Ping Fangyi's eyes. Her eyes were blank, but her movements weren't slow. Was he being hypnotized? When Ping Fangyi woke up, she wouldn't remember what she had done. She didn't know why the emperor disliked her and even ordered her to die. She would fall out of favor or lose her life without knowing why. Ning Shu thought of Liang Meiren. He thought that Liang Meiren didn't do anything, but she made a big move. With Ping Fangyi's actions, falling out of favor was inevitable. If the imperial censor in the imperial court impeached her, Ping Fangyi's fate would be very bad. But if the emperor liked this kind of thing, he might not blame her. The eunuchs quickly picked up the cloak and coat on the ground. Several eunuchs held Ping Fangyi's hands tightly to prevent her from taking off her innermost clothes. They put the clothes and cloak on her body, but Ping Fangyi was still struggling, wanting to continue dancing. Ning Shu asked the eunuchs to tie Ping Fangyi up and send her back to the palace. He locked the door and let her dance in the room. This kind of hypnosis was a bit like sleepwalking. She didn't remember anything after waking up. Hypnosis could be considered a big weapon, but it had to ensure that the person being hypnotized didn't have a strong mental power. If they knew hypnosis, they wouldn't know if they were counter-hypnotized. Next, Ping Fangyi's matters spread like the wind to every corner. It was said that Ping Fangyi tried to seduce the emperor by taking off her clothes in front of Xianda Palace Hall. As a result, she was thrown back to the palace. During the morning court, some imperial censors said that this kind of trend should be stopped. If you want to fight for favor, you have to take off your clothes in front of someone else's door. If this kind of trend spread to the common people, it would be terrible. Usually, the trends in the imperial palace would spread outside the palace. It would be imitated by the nobles, wealthy merchants, and all social classes. Ning Shu only said, Ping Fangyi lost her mind. She underestimated Gu Yi. She thought that she was a lazy and soft little girl. Her methods were good. Ping Fangyi danced in the room for a day. She took off her clothes and finally fell asleep. When she woke up from the cold, she saw that she was lying on the cold floor. There was nothing on her body. She was very confused. She didn't know what happened. She stood up from the cold and put on her clothes. However, she couldn't open the door. The door was locked from the outside. Open the door, quick, quick. Ping Fangyi instinctively felt that something was wrong. There was no palace made by her side to serve her. She was also locked up. Ping Fangyi didn't remember what happened at all. Open the door, quick, open the door. Ping Fangyi knocked on the door with all her strength. However, no one paid attention to her. It was clearly cold, but Ping Fangyi was so anxious that she broke out in a cold sweat. Being locked up in such a sealed space, was a man going to be let in next? This kind of insulting her chastity and giving the emperor a green belt was definitely a death sentence. Ping Fangyi didn't want to die. She didn't want to die in this lonely palace. She didn't want to become a wandering soul in this palace. Could it be that something happened while she was asleep? Otherwise, how could her clothes have left her body? She was envied. She didn't remember anything. Was she drugged? Ping Fangyi was so frightened that her face was distorted. She didn't understand who was afraid of her. What was the situation now? No one came to explain to her. The more she thought about it, the more scared she became. Ping Fangyi successfully scared herself. She slammed on the door and shouted hoarsely. However, no one looked at her. Even if the palace maids passed by this room, they hurriedly lowered their heads and walked away quickly. Ning Shu had placed the empress child under his knee to raise. Previously, he was incomparably calm. He looked as if he could kill or cut him. However, when Ning Shu wanted to take the child away, he instantly went crazy. He tightly hugged the child, looking as if he wanted to take the child down with him. Ning Shu, what was the situation? It seemed like she was a human trafficker? This child was also the child of the client. Why did the empress have such an expression? Chapter 2340. This child was also the son of the first wife. It was fine for Ning Shu to get close to him, but the empress, perhaps something had happened to this child in the previous life, or perhaps the person who entrusted this child did something to this child. Ning Shu didn't insist on getting close to this little baby. She drooled and her saliva stretched out like a thread. It was boring to see the Empress trembling with the child in her arms. The Empress watched as Ning Shu left. Her entire body seemed to have lost its strength. She hugged the child who was calling for his mother. The Empress hugged the child tightly and cried. She did not want this child to be like in the previous life. This child was raised by the incapable ruler. Although he was made the crown prince, he scolded the child for every small mistake. This made the child more and more afraid of him. In the end, he was framed and became the dethroned crown prince. He died before the age of 20. He died trembling with fear. The fatuous ruler never knew how much his children feared him. He did things timidly and lived in fear forever. In this life, the Empress wanted to give the child what he wanted. She wanted him to be a crown prince, not a submissive crown prince. A child without a mother to protect him. She stayed in the cold palace and became the child's weakness. He did not have a prominent maternal family. Every step he took made him afraid. Mother! The child did not understand and sweetly called for his mother. The Empress felt an indescribable sense of self-abandonment. She felt that her efforts were useless. Nothing had changed. The fate of the Shun family had not changed. The Empress wanted to hang herself here. But if she died, the fate of the Shun family and the fate of her child would not change. She wanted to die but could not. This sense of helplessness and despair tortured her. She did not know what to do. Empress Shun broke down and grabbed her hair. The child seemed to feel her pain, despair, and helplessness. He cried as he wiped his tears. Mother, mother, I am afraid. Don't be afraid. Mother will protect you. I will not let anyone hurt you. I will do anything for you, even if I have to give up my life. Her soul floated in the palace, watching everything that happened in the palace. She watched as the incapable ruler scolded her child. She watched as the child knelt on the ground and admitted his mistake, sobbing. His entire body was trembling with fear. She couldn't let her child fall into that situation again. She wanted to drag the incapable ruler down with her. If she died, Aunt Empress Dowager would definitely let this child ascend the throne because this child's body had the blood of the Shun family. Other than this child, the other children in the harem were all very young and did not have many children. This child was the only choice of the Empress Dowager. A ray of light suddenly flashed into the Empress's heart. It was like a bolt of lightning that lit up her heart. This was a way. She sacrificed herself to give her child a chance to survive. However, would this child also become a puppet emperor like the current emperor? Becoming a puppet emperor was better than having an emperor suppressing him every day and wanting to take his life at any time. The Empress hugged the child tightly, almost sinking the child into her body. She made up her mind. Mother! The child didn't understand what she was saying at all. Ning Shu naturally didn't know that Empress Shen had suffered so much. Being reborn meant that she had a chance to make a new choice in her life. She could avoid her previous mistakes. Perhaps in her previous life, Empress Shen had succeeded. That was why the person who entrusted her with the task offered his soul power to counterattack. A few days later, after Ning Shu left court, the Empress was waiting for him at the entrance of Xuanda Hall. What's the matter? Empress Ning Shu asked. Your Majesty. The Empress reached out and grabbed Ning Shu's hand. Empress, for the sake of so many years of marriage, please let the Shun family go, okay? Ning Shu. The Empress's attitude was really the same every day? Being held by the Empress's slightly trembling hand, Ning Shu was really speechless. Is there anything else? I made some food for you, Empress. Have a taste. Empress Ning Shu smiled gently. She was wearing a palace dress, graceful and luxurious. Her head ornament was dazzling and her face was powdered. Women doll themselves up for those who like them. If a woman didn't dress up for those who like her, then she was going to make a big move. Flaming red lips and eyeliner. That was definitely a sign of blackening. As far as the Empress was concerned, it was impossible for those who liked her. After all, she had given up on the person who entrusted her. So she was definitely going to make a big move. Ning Shu pulled back his hand and said, I won't eat it. The Empress didn't care. She turned around and walked away gracefully. Ning Shu patted her hand and watched her fingernails slowly turn black. Ning Shu raised her hand and looked at it. Where did the Empress get so much poison? She was really drunk. Ning Shu circulated her qi and pricked her finger. Black blood flowed out of the wound with a fishy smell. A black line appeared on Ning Shu's wrist. It was poison. The black line was forced back. Ning Shu was sweating all over. She asked Xiaolu to prepare water for her to wash up. The Empress was really determined to kill her. If one time didn't work, she would try twice. This time, she fed the poison with her body and sacrificed her own life to drag her down with her. The Empress left Xuanda Hall. Her lips were a little bruised. Even the bright red lipstick couldn't cover the bruise. The Empress endured the pain of her body and went to the Empress Dowager's palace. She said some specious words to the Empress Dowager, who was cultivating her mind. The Empress Dowager had lived through all kinds of palace struggles. When she heard the Empress words that seemed to be her last words, she felt something was wrong and asked what had happened. The Empress naturally wouldn't say that she had killed her son. But after the Emperor died, she would also die. The Empress Dowager only said to take good care of her child. The Empress leaned against the wall, black blood flowing out of her mouth. She finally returned to her palace. She wiped the blood from her mouth and called the child over. She touched the child's face. The Empress's throat was sweet and she couldn't help but want to spit blood. She had the wet nurse take the child away. She couldn't let the child see his mother die. The Empress had been waiting for the news of the Emperor's death. But her life was slipping away. She didn't hear the death knell. Instead, in her hazy consciousness, she heard the arrival of the Emperor. The Empress' mind shook and she spat out a mouthful of black blood. She saw a figure slowly walk in and reach her bedside in a flash. Ning Shu touched the Empress' hand and examined the Empress' black fingernails. "Why can't you figure it out?" Ning Shu seemed to show off as he reached out his hand. The fingernails were light pink and had a healthy glow. It was clear that he hadn't been poisoned. The Empress' eyes widened as she looked at Ning Shu's finger. Black blood flowed out of the corner of her mouth. "Why? You killed Jin once. Shouldn't Jin be more alert? Even if you fed the poison with your body." Chapter 2341. The Empress smiled sadly and her eyes dimmed. She looked at Ning Shu with a complicated expression. "Your Majesty, have you never had me in your heart?" "Even ordinary couples have times when they see each other as enemies," Ning Shu said faintly. "Your Majesty, do you see me as an enemy?" "No, you see me as an enemy." It was too late to talk about whether he had feelings for her or not. The Empress should have a good rest. Don't play with poison all day." Ning Shu stood up and left. The Empress's death was delayed until the next morning. The funeral was very grand. The 3-year-old child didn't know what death was. He just cried and called for his mother. Ning Shu held the child and looked at the Empress's coffin. He could vaguely see the Empress's soul circling around her. Tears of blood seemed to flow out of her eyes and she pounced on the child again. Ning Shu chanted the Rebirth Sutra. A black hole appeared. The Empress's soul was very dim after her rebirth. It seemed that a gust of wind could blow it away. She probably couldn't even escape from the black hole. The Empress didn't think of entering the world of samsara until the black hole disappeared. Ning Shu also gave up the idea of sending the Empress to the afterlife. The Empress's obsession was very strong. She didn't want to enter the black hole. Maybe she wanted to be reborn again. But with the Empress's soul power, it was basically impossible for her to be reborn again. Since she was willing to be buried in the palace, Ning Shu would fulfill her wish. Even though the Empress's soul was hovering around Ning Shu, she couldn't hurt Ning Shu. Ning Shu led the little prince into the Xuanda Palace. The Empress's soul followed behind. Under the sunlight, her soul became more transparent. Ning Shu smiled at where the Empress was standing. The Empress was very angry. She couldn't hurt the Emperor at all. This fatuous Emperor was protected by the astral wind. Why was such a fatuous Emperor protected by the heavens? It was unfair. He stepped on the bones of the Shun family and his hands were stained with blood. Why was such a person protected by the heavens? It was unfair. It was unfair. Looking at the child sitting on the lap of the incapable ruler, even if it was her soul, the Empress felt a heart-wrenching pain. She had worked so hard, why was it still like this? Her child died of depression, living in fear all day long. It was just that the client couldn't see it. If he knew that there was someone watching him every day, going to the toilet, pampering his concubines, attending court, and reviewing memorials, it would feel great. If he was right, the queen would soon disappear. If she couldn't enter the world of samsara, she wouldn't have a chance to start over. Ning Shu wiped the child's saliva with a handkerchief and began to review the memorials. The client should have high hopes for this child. Your Majesty, Beauty Liang is waiting for your summons outside the hall, Xiao Lu said. Ning Shu nodded and let her in. Good Beauty saluted Ning Shu politely. After saluting, she secretly looked at Ning Shu. She seemed to be observing whether the emperor in front of her was a mission enforcer or a real emperor. Why are you looking at us? Ning Shu asked. I have embroidered a pouch for your Majesty. It can calm your mind. Beauty Liang took out a very delicate pouch. It was obviously embroidered, but there was no extra thread. It was very delicate. It's very beautiful. It's good that your Majesty likes it. This time I came to thank your Majesty. What are you thanking me for? Everyone understood each other. Why did she say it out loud? Beauty Liang wanted to say something, but she stopped. The atmosphere was a bit stiff. Beauty Liang couldn't find a topic to talk about. She could only leave first. Ning Shu sniffed the pouch. It was really a medicinal herb that could calm the mind. This mission enforcer knew medicine. It was very good. The more methods he had, the better he could protect himself. Who said that mission enforcers were definitely safe? Mission enforcers would also die miserably. Mission completed. Do you want to leave the mission enforcer's world? 2333's voice sounded. Ning Shu nodded. He was thinking about whether to continue the mission or go back. After thinking about it, he decided to go back. After all, he had to repair the peerless martial arts and feed the world of reincarnation. There were too many things to do. He had to go back and finish them before proceeding to the next mission. Back in the system space, there was half a bottle of pure golden soul origin liquid on the table. Ning Shu poured all the soul origin liquid on the world origin. As soon as the soul origin liquid touched the world origin, it was all absorbed by the peerless martial arts. Not a single drop was left. So greedy. After absorbing half a bottle of soul origin, the peerless martial arts didn't seem to have any changes. There were cracks all over it. It seemed that the cracks didn't decrease. Absorbing the soul origin liquid seemed to be useless. Ning Shu touched the peerless martial arts in melancholy. He felt that repairing the world was still far away. Even if it was repaired, there was still a bomb inside. Even if it was repaired, who knows when the law of nothingness would swallow the world. Damn it. How could he get that beautiful star stone? This thing didn't seem to be circulating in the market anymore. It couldn't be bought. It didn't matter if it was expensive, as long as it was available. But for something like this that couldn't be bought with money, it was really miserable. Without the soul origin liquid, Ning Shu had no choice. He took out some soul origin liquid and golden stones and let 2333 take them to the main system to purify. After feeding the peerless martial arts, Ning Shu poured some soul power into the black hole to feed the world of reincarnation. He sent all the purified soul stones to the main system into the black hole. These souls couldn't be used by him. They were all given to the black hole. After dealing with the two gluttons, Ning Shu began to absorb the soul power of this mission. It didn't take long for the soul power to be absorbed. Ning Shu smacked his lips. Damn, this soul power was so little. It probably wasn't that the soul power was little, but that she saw too many soul stones. This bit of soul power was just too little. Ning Shu stretched lazily and decided to take a look at the 9 Palace Mountain Soul Stone Mine and mine there. Ning Shu clicked on the video to see the situation of the client. The client went back and exiled the Shen family. Men, women, old and young were all exiled. If they could live, they could live. If they couldn't, then forget it. The Empress was dead. The client focused on raising the stepson. The Empress Dowager's cough had almost recovered. But after the Shun family was exiled, her condition worsened. She was bedridden every day. The emperor would visit the Empress Dowager every day. The Empress Dowager held the emperor's hand and said that the emperor was cruel. If he could imprison the Shun family, why did he exile them to a bitter, cold place? The emperor only asked the Empress Dowager to recuperate and didn't need to care about political affairs. As for the evil spirits in the harem, the dancing Pingfangi was banished to the cold palace. Lu Jiaoyi, who needed to care for the emperor all day long, was also banished to the cold palace. The two of them were kept company together. The two of them suddenly came to the desolate cold palace. Both of them were stunned. They couldn't accept this fact. Chapter 2342. When someone looked at you, they would always use an "I know you the best" expression. Even the person couldn't see themselves clearly and understand themselves, let alone others. Lu Jiaoyi didn't do anything wrong, it was just that she always had an "I want to talk to you" expression that made people speechless. If you really lacked love and were lonely, couldn't the client find other ways? Why did she have to talk to you? As for Pingfangi, playing the mind game was originally exciting and dangerous. It was very likely that she would fail. Even an experienced driver would fail. If she lost, she could only accept it. If she could climb back up again, that was called skill. Ning Shu closed the video and took a look at his own attributes. It had been a long time since he looked at the attribute panel. Recently, he had been on the battlefield and had used up all his faith. Name, Ning Shu. Age, 27 level, Super Client Points card, 243, 10 million points for 1 point card. Soul, 18 life, 16 wisdom, 18 luck, 20 charm, 13 spirit, 21 martial strength, 19 aptitude, 19 faith, 18231 merit, 246169 soul strength, 81 plus 5 authorization ticket, none pure heart, none comprehended law, water law incarnation, constructed world, suspected to be the world of reincarnation tools, calm halo, heart calming pill, faith halo, amulet 4, upgraded amulet plus 2 honorary titles, goddess of war, selfless ancestor skills, 5th ring shooting technique, intermediate fighting technique, intermediate level poison technique, beginner level business management knowledge, beginner level code programming, beginner level lawyer skill, sage ghost catching skill, beginner level cooking skill, intermediate level embroidery skill, trash hypnosis halo, mother of the world, queen's blessing, sister model worker, Chen Shi's blessing, leader halo, grass blessing, lifelong best friend, Miao Miao Miao's blessing, life-saving hand, Zhu Su, Nyang's blessing, founding woman, Chen Ermiai's blessing, beauty in law, Qin Ning's blessing, bane of the blood clan, Jasmine's blessing, cross-race communication, by San Yang's blessing, brave heart, Wang Ying's blessing, bloodthirsty tyrant, and I Bingyan's blessing. Fulfill the client's wish, seize power, mission completion rate, 100%. Mission rewards obtained, 15-point cards, 12 attribute points, 50% of soul power, 12030 faith power, including accumulated in previous worlds, 30 merit points, 40% of external soul power, 40% of soul source. Ning Shu looked at his reward and saw that he only had a little over 10,000 faith power left. Ning Shu was speechless. Damn, she only had this little bit of faith power left. War really burned money, not to mention that she still had some before collecting taxes. She had spent all of it. In any case, he had paid a huge price to keep his life. Ning Shu 2333 asked, "Is it because the war is over? Will it not deduct more soul energy from the quest takers?" Previously, the main system would take away 10% more soul energy, but now that the war was over, why was it only 50%? Ning Shu exhaled, 2333, "What did you say?" "I'm absorbing the power of the system." 2333 asked, "I'm asking why is there so little soul energy this time? It was only 50%. Oh, it's an intermediate world. The client did not give up all of his soul energy, so your share is less." 2333 said and disappeared. Originally, Ning Shu wanted to ask if there would be more soul energy after the war, but 2333 did not respond. Ning Shu gave up on asking 2333 and directly opened the main system to ask if the main system would take an extra 10% of soul energy after the war. The main system simply replied with 2 words, no. Well, it was good that it wouldn't. Previously, the extra soul energy was probably collected to strengthen the soul army. Now that the war was over, the usual soul energy that the system took was enough. Ning Shu did not know what other people's attribute panel looked like, but he felt that his attribute panel was very ugly. His attribute points were all 10 to 20 points. He did not know what the passing line was, but his attribute points did not pass. Ning Shu casually added the attribute points. He felt that it was better to go mining. Maybe doing quests would be useful, but mining was a big matter. No one could stop Ning Shu from earning money for milk powder. It would be better if there were star stones. Should he ask the silver-haired man again? Ning Shu felt that it would be difficult for him to receive taxes from the silver-haired man. After all, he did not receive any taxes for 100 years. If he could not receive taxes from the silver-haired man in this life, what was the difference between life and a salted fish? Name: Ning Shu. Age: 27. Level: Super Quest Taker Contribution Card, 243, 10 million for 1 contribution card. Soul points: 18 plus 2 health points, 16 wisdom, 18 plus 2 luck, 20 plus 2 charm, 13 plus 2 spirit, 21 plus 2 force, 19 plus 2 aptitude, 19 plus 2 faith, 18,231 plus 12030 merit, 246,169 plus 30,000 soul strength, 86 plus 4 authorization ticket, none pure heart, none comprehended law, water law incarnation, constructed world, suspected to be the world of reincarnation items, calm aura, calming pill, faith aura, amulet 4, upgraded amulet plus 2 honorary titles, goddess of war, selfless ancestor skills, 5th ring shooting technique, intermediate fighting technique, intermediate level poison technique, beginner level business management knowledge, beginner level code programming, beginner level lawyer skill, sage ghost catching skill, beginner level cooking skill, intermediate level embroidery skill, trash hypnosis aura, mother of the world, queen's blessing, sister model worker, Chinshi's blessing, leader aura, grass's blessing, best friend for life, meow meow meow's blessing, healer, Zhu Su's blessing, founding lady, Chen Ermiai's blessing, lawful lady, Chen Ning's blessing, bane of the blood clan, Jasmine's blessing, transcending race communication, Bai Sanyang's blessing, brave heart, Wang Ying's blessing, bloodthirsty tyrant, and Ai Bingyan's blessing. The chat system beeped. Ning Shu opened it and saw that it was a message from Mei Ziqing. He said that he had repaid 30,000 merit points and asked Ning Shu to check. Ning Shu looked at his balance and said that he had received it. Mei Ziqing, where have you been? Why haven't I seen you in Water City? I couldn't contact you either. Ning Shu, I went to hell on earth. Don't mention it. It was better not to talk about the war. Anyway, it was already over. Talking about it now would only cause panic. Besides, there was still a long time before the next war. The origin of the world and the fragments of the broken plane were things that the rats wanted. If they couldn't be given to the plane with living creatures, then they could use these things as replacements. The rats couldn't be eliminated. Their reproductive ability was heaven-defying. It was unrealistic to ask them not to eat the plane. She couldn't even pick up the fragments of the plane. She was speechless. It was because she wasn't strong enough. The fragments of the plane contained a lot of rules and information about the heavenly Tao. It would be good if she could learn something from the fragments. Chapter 2343. Mei Ziqing, I was wondering why I couldn't find you recently. Ning Shu, why are you looking for me? If you want to pay me back, just transfer the money to my identity card. Ning Shu, right, where's Xiaohua? Is Xiaohua back? Mei Ziqing, no, not at all. He hasn't shown up until now. I don't know where he went. I'm worried that Xiaohua might have been eaten. Ning Shu felt that this was possible. Xiaohua was naive and sweet, while Pan Chen was the big bad wolf. He would definitely sell Xiaohua. Xiaohua would help him count the money, and it was very likely that he was eaten. Even if he wasn't eaten, Xiaohua would probably be fooled by Pan Qin. Moreover, Xiaohua still had her 2 stones. Although they might not be the world's origin, it would be great if they could hatch something good. Ning Shu was worried that Xiaohua might have been eaten, let alone Mei Ziqing. Why did Mei Ziqing have so many worries for him? There were benefits to being alone. She coveted the warmth of having someone by her side, so she had to take on this responsibility. Ning Shu scratched his head and replied, "It should be fine. Can you sense that he's still alive?" He didn't believe that Mei Ziqing didn't put any tools on Xiaohua. Mei Ziqing, although I can sense it, it doesn't mean that he's still alive. Ning Shu couldn't comfort her and could only shrug. No matter what he said, it wouldn't be enough to comfort Mei Ziqing. After all, she wasn't the one who had to worry about Xiaohua. She couldn't empathize with Mei Ziqing. Ning Shu, the prices are normal now. There might be a lot of world's origin on the market. You can go look for it. The prices were high previously because all the resources had to be used in the war. There was also world's origin, which was something to be negotiated. Now that the war was over, there should be world's origins circulating on the market. Mei Ziqing nodded. Ning Shu felt that if Mei Ziqing wanted to successfully construct a world, he would have to be heavily in debt. After all, a world origin required a lot of money. Moreover, constructing a world required 7 world origins. Even if all 7 world origins were gathered, he might not be able to summon a living world. Perhaps you only created a space to store things, and not a plane that could give birth to living beings. In short, there was a lot of uncertainty in the process. He was not sure what problems had occurred in the process of the world's transformation, or if it had developed in a different direction, the outcome might have been completely different. This was a little fucking frustrating. Now, Mei Ziqing was burdened with debt and had to tighten his belt. He had to either spend time doing missions, searching world after world, or buy them with money. Thinking about how she had been looking for the world's origin, she had almost vomited. In the end, nearly half of the world's origin had been bought with money. Therefore, it was difficult to do anything without money. If one wanted to be strong, one had to have resources. Mei Ziqing also felt a lot of pressure. After chatting with Ning Shu for a while, he went offline, saying that he was going to do a mission and also look for the world's source and Xiaohua. Perhaps he would meet the wanton and pretentious Xiaohua in a certain world. Ning Shu could only think that the probability of this was a little low. After all, there were billions of planes, and it just so happened to be in one world. Even if it was in one world, to meet it among billions of living beings, how low was the probability? It was negligible. Just as he was about to close the chat system, Tian sent a message, saying that the soul's origin had been sold. Should he transfer the money to her now? Some things were better explained in person. Ning Shu appeared in the city of water in a flash. When he arrived at the auction house, Tian was waiting for him. "How much did you sell it for this time?" Ning Shu asked Tian. It was enough to have some money on him. Right now, the soul's origin was more important to repair the world. "Not bad, 6 million faith power," Tian said. "This is the money after the auction house takes a cut." Ning Shu was very satisfied. 6 million faith power was enough for him to create a scene for a long time. Tian transferred the money to Ning Shu and asked, "City Lord, do you still have this?" Ning Shu shook his head. "No. If the soul's origin was so cheap, it wouldn't be so precious." Tian said calmly, "Although it's not pure soul's origin, it seems to be selling well. The price is rising steadily. Many people have inquired. If City Lord still has it, Tian can help to hype it up." Ning Shu wasn't tempted at all. He shook his head and said, "No. What about the soul stones? The soul stones you brought over before?" Tian asked. "You didn't want them when I asked you before. Now you don't have them." Ning Shu said, "Why didn't you say you needed them earlier? I took them all to the main system to purify. Now there's nothing left." Tian's eyes swept across Ning Shu's face. She tapped her finger on the table. Ning Shu asked in boredom, "Do you have star stones?" It's a shining, beautiful stone that can hold the law of nothingness. Speaking of the law of nothingness, Ning Shu's intestines were in a knot. There's no such thing. Si Tian said, it's not available on the market. Ning Shu was speechless. You can't buy it even if you have money. Do you have a better world carrier? Even if he didn't give up on the peerless martial arts, he could still make preparations. He could choose a carrier to transfer the law of nothingness out of the peerless martial arts and then send this world up for someone to deal with the law of nothingness. Ning Shu felt like he was carrying a bomb every day. He didn't know when this bomb would explode and everything would be blown up. City Lord, what kind of carrier do you want? Si Tian asked. A carrier that can form a world will do. It was originally to transfer the law of nothingness. There is, but it might not be able to form a world. In fact, there are many carriers of worlds. A flower, a grain of sand, a mountain, a rock, a tree, a book. But not all of them can form a world, Si Tian said. What carrier do you have in your hands? Ning Shu said, something that can at least form a space? I don't have it in stock. If you need a space, you might as well buy a ready-made space. This kind of space can't form a living world, Si Tian said. When Ning Shu heard this, he felt that it was a good idea. Do you have a space? Ning Shu's face was cold. Then what do you have? This kind of thing usually can't be sold. You want me to find it for you? Si Tian said. Ning Shu nodded. Find it well. I definitely want a space. He transferred the bomb in the peerless martial arts. Si Tian nodded. After the matter was settled, Si Tian asked Ning Shu what he needed. Ning Shu said, I only want star stones. Si Tian was speechless. City Lord, you can look at the others. Ning Shu shook his head. No need. He didn't listen to Si Tian's promotion. He didn't know what Si Tian was going to promote to him. Ning Shu realized that his ears were a little soft. He definitely couldn't listen. Chapter 2344. After leaving the auction house, Ning Shu went to the silver-haired man's consultation room. He knew that this was a scam, but he still walked in. This feeling was too good. However, it was okay to spend some money to answer the doubts in one's heart. Whether it was worth it or not depended on the person. Ning Shu walked into the consultation room and sat down. He smelled the incense and waited for the man in the cheongsam to come out. The silver-haired man opened the curtain and came out with a book. He sat down and asked, What do you want to ask? I want to ask about the Starlight Stone. It's a stone that can hold the law of nothingness. Where can I find it? Ning Shu asked. He didn't know how long the Starlight Stone could last after sacrificing 100 years of tax. The silver-haired man said, This thing is not a commodity, so it's not traded. Then how can I get it? Ning Shu asked. The silver-haired man said, This thing won't be sold or traded. It has a greater use. Ning Shu was very disappointed. If this Starlight Stone was slowly devoured by the law of nothingness, it would devour his world. He should wait for the space to come and quickly transfer the law of nothingness. His head hurt. Can I get it? Ning Shu asked. The silver-haired man said, No. Why? It has a greater use. This kind of thing can only be too little and not too much. Well, if he couldn't buy it or trade it, he could only rely on himself. He asked, Where do you usually find this kind of thing? The silver-haired man said, This kind of thing grows where the plains meet. It's connected to the plains. Ning Shu, I'll go. Can I go and dig it? Ning Shu asked. If you can dig it too. The silver-haired man said, It has to withstand the huge pressure in the middle of the plains, the spatial wind, and the destruction of all kinds of nomological powers. Ning Shu was expressionless. Of course, if you find out that you're digging it, this is illegal activity. The consequences won't be good. The silver-haired man said, This kind of stone is connected to the plains. If you dig it, what do you think will happen? It's like a string with beads. What will happen if the string breaks? Ning Shu shook his head. I don't know. The silver-haired man glanced at Ning Shu, but still explained, There will be planes that will break away from the sea of laws, wander around, and finally be destroyed. Ning Shu was suddenly enlightened. Any other questions? The silver-haired man asked. Ning Shu stroked his chin. Then let me ask a more personal question. Has your world been restored? I saw that several pages of your book were broken. The silver-haired man. Thank you for your concern, but no. Hearing that the silver-haired man did not fix the world, Ning Shu felt much better. Finally, there was someone who was as miserable as her. Any other questions? The silver-haired man asked. Ning Shu thought about it and asked, what are the chances of me transferring the law of nothingness to another space? Be more specific. Cough, cough. Ning Shu coughed and cleared his throat. He explained the ins and outs of the matter clearly, then asked, do you think it can be transferred to another space? In order to preserve the peerless martial art, Ning Shu had already used up all his strength and resources. He did not use his soul for the peerless martial art. He did not use his soul power for the world of reincarnation. He did not need to eat or drink to feed his child. The silver-haired man frowned. He was clearly thinking. Ning Shu did not disturb him. She waited at the side. Breathing in the fragrance, she felt a little sleepy. In the past, when she rested, she would always light some agarwood. Now, when she smelled it, she felt sleepy. What do you think? Ning Shu asked. The silver-haired man cautiously said, combining your strength and the law of nothingness's strength, the chances of you successfully transferring the law of nothingness to another space is about 0. Ning Shu wanted to smash his cup. This was a scam. The silver-haired man continued, as time passes, the law of nothingness will expand, and your strength may not be able to keep up with the expansion of the law of nothingness. Therefore, as time passes, the chances of you moving the law of nothingness will be negative. Ning Shu, that meant it was impossible. If there was no way to move it, then what was the point of buying a space? It was a waste of money. The problem was that this bomb could not be removed. Did she have to keep it with her? Fuck, don't come near me. I even want to explode myself. Why do you keep such a dangerous thing with you? You can ask the main system to deal with it, the silver-haired man said. Ning Shu scratched his head. So, did he have to hand this thing over again? Ning Shu felt that the peerless martial art was really pitiful. I have already handed this thing over to the judges, and they returned it to me. At the same time, they took away 100 years' worth of taxes. He could not absorb it. I see. The silver-haired man did not say anything else. Any other questions? Ning Shu shook his head. He was immersed in the sadness of not being able to move the bomb. Do you have the Mission Enforcer's Code of Conduct here? Give me a copy. Ning Shu said. Sometimes, it was really inconvenient to ask 2333. If it was big or small, it was better to look at it himself and know what to do. Moreover, 2333's system would crash from time to time. She had no idea what he was doing. It was especially abnormal. Sometimes, he would not respond even when she shouted. She always felt that when 2333 was talking to her, in a place where she could not see, he would put on a cold face and occasionally act cute. Kiss moi, horrifying. The silver-haired man frowned. If I remember correctly, you should be a super mission enforcer. Asking me for the Mission Enforcer's Code of Conduct, isn't this something that a newbie should know? Ning Shu, I asked for it on behalf of someone else. The silver-haired man did not say anything. He took out a book that was as thick as a dictionary. This is it. Ning Shu, so thick? What did it say? Ning Shu accepted the book. It was really heavy, but the name was the System's Code of Conduct. Was this book for the system to read? Ning Shu accepted the book. After thinking about it, there was nothing else to ask. So he asked how much it was. A few questions and a code of conduct. A total of 100,000 merit points. The silver-haired man said. Ning Shu asked again, I really can't get the star stone. If you have the ability to dig it up and not get caught, then you have the ability. The silver-haired man said. Ning Shu. Ning Shu swiped his card and returned to the system space with the thick code of conduct. Then he flipped through the code of conduct page by page. This book was for the system, and the system was responsible for explaining it to the mission enforcer. Ning Shu, 2333. Ning Shu flipped through the book page by page. Fortunately, with the increase in intelligence, he could now have a photographic memory. Rote memorization was still very impressive. Memorize it first. There were many things 2333 did not tell him. Maybe he felt that it was not important, but Ning Shu's heart was full of waves. She estimated that no newbie mission enforcer knew the code of conduct. How embarrassing. The reason why she thought of this was because 2333 was in a dead state at any time. So, if she encountered something that she could not explain, she had to rely on herself. Chapter 2345. Ning Shu flipped through the book page by page. It was very quiet in the system space, except for the occasional sound of the spirit fish swaying their tails. After flipping through the book, Ning Shu felt dizzy. It took him a while to feel better. Putting the book on the bookshelf, Ning Shu took some spirit liquid from the spirit pool and opened the black hole. He walked to the front of Nine Palace Mountain and went to the mine. Walking into the mine, the golden earthworm was staring at the pocket-sized baby in the bud. When it saw Ning Shu, it only glanced at him before looking away. Ning Shu poured the spirit liquid from the bottle around the golden thread grass and dripped some green liquid full of vitality into the soil. He won't mature so quickly. Follow me to mine. He should still need to eat a lot of soul origin, Ning Shu said to the golden earthworm. The golden earthworm looked at Ning Shu with two small eyes that couldn't be any smaller. Why do you have to follow me to mine every time? From the beginning, you broke into my territory and stole my soul stone. Now, you want to enslave me to do hard labor for you. What do I owe you? I swore that I would never be enslaved by two-legged monsters again. Risking self-destruction and polluting the entire mine as the price. Ning Shu looked at the golden earthworm. Just say that you were enslaved in the past. Yes, I was enslaved in the past. So, if anyone wants to enslave me again, I don't want this life. I'd rather die than force me. The golden earthworm revealed its sharp fangs. Black venom floated at the tip of its fangs. The pitch-black venom caused the leaves of the golden thread grass to wither a little. Seeing this, the golden earthworm quickly withdrew its fangs. Look at how excited you are. When did I say that I wanted to enslave you? You look too disgusting. Without you, I can still mine. It's just a matter of time. You're not that important in my heart. Ning Shu looked at the golden thread grass that was dripping with the green liquid. The golden earthworm stood up and looked at the baby in the bud. It revealed the gratified expression of an old father seeing his son. Who knew how he could make such an expression at such a young age? He never woke up? Ning Shu asked. No, I've been waiting for him to wake up. Then, I'll meet his gaze in the most perfect state, the golden earthworm said. Ning Shu was speechless. He really wanted to tell the golden earthworm the cruel truth. I found a danger zone. There should be some treasures there. Come with me, Ning Shu said. The golden earthworm chuckled. I've said it before. I won't let myself be enslaved again. Being locked up by a two-legged monster is very, very painful. If it wasn't for the fact that I can't bear to part with the soul stone mine here, I would really want to go out and bite a soul. If he wanted to tame it, he would have to beat it with a stick. This was an earthworm with a story. Ning Shu, someone like you wants to take revenge on society? Hurry up and leave. If you don't dare to go out, that's because you're a coward. There are many strong humans. Do you want to go? The mountain range that had been struck by lightning was too hard. It was better to let the golden earthworm drill into it and see if it could drill into the mountain range to take a look. As soon as she did, lightning struck her. No, the golden earthworm said without hesitation. The golden earthworm said without hesitation, what if we leave him here and he gets plucked? What if he gets eaten? What if something happens to him? Ning Shu, now it's like an old mother who can't leave her son. Ning Shu set up a barrier. Let's go. No one can break my barrier. I don't believe in the two-legged monster. Okay, let's go. There should be some treasures in that mountain range. The tribulation clouds didn't disperse for a long time and struck day and night. The two-legged monster looked back 3 times with every step. It followed behind Ning Shu, but it also wanted to see the treasure. It was so conflicted that it wanted to cut its own body in two. In the end, the two-legged monster really did it. It really cut its body in two. A head grew out of the other part, and there were golden horns on its head. Ning Shu turned around and saw the earthworm cutting itself in two. He was in a mess. Half of him was guarding the golden thread grass, and the other half was following behind her. Ning Shu looked at the golden earthworm's body. "What are you playing at? I don't trust him." "Ning Shu, it's true love." Ning Shu felt a little strange. If the earthworm knew that the child woke up twice, it would probably explode in anger. Ning Shu and the earthworm went to the place where lightning gathered. After Ning Shu left the world, Gu Yi's system felt less pressure. This was the suppression of power between systems. There were 3 systems in the palace. That was why Ping Fangyi's system ran away. We also left the mission. The mission enforcer has left. The real emperor is coming back. Change the enforcer back to avoid being recognized. The system said. Gu Yi nodded and said, "Okay." Looking at the embroidery in front of her, "It's a pity that I embroidered a lot of things. I can't take them away." Gu Yi's soul appeared in the system space. Her soul wasn't strong. After completing a mission, her soul was a little dim. The system said, "The mission this time wasn't good. The completion rate is only 80%. If this rate is too high, you will be in danger." Gu Yi's system space was empty. She sat on the ground and said to her system, "I know. I will work hard. But you know that I don't like to be entangled with other men. So, don't arrange for me to do that kind of thing with other men." From the state of her soul, Gu Yi should be very young. Plus, her round face made her look even younger. Her hair was tied up in a bun. Looking at the bun, she was an unmarried woman. The system said, "Then I will try my best to be more considerate. But I hope that there will be fewer mistakes like the last mission. This is not a game. I hope you can be more serious. Our lives are tied together. I will work hard. Even if it's for you, I will make myself stronger." Gu Yi clenched her fist and said, "That mission enforcer gave me a bad feeling." The system sighed. Its tone was a little sad. This was the first time Gu Yi heard the system say this. The system had always been calm and self-controlled. No matter what it did, it would always arrange the best plan and then she would carry it out. Although their cooperation wasn't perfect, Gu Yi worked hard to keep up with the system's footsteps. The system only had a series of numbers but no name. Gu Yi asked, "System, what is your name?" The system said, "I don't remember." "Why don't you remember?" Gu Yi asked curiously. "The past of the system will be erased." "So pitiful. Then will there be a chance to remember the past?" Gu Yi asked. "Maybe there will be a chance, maybe there won't. There is no need to be obsessed with the past. Without memories, you will be reborn. You and I are the same. I won't be obsessed with remembering anything." Gu Yi nodded and began to sit cross-legged to absorb the pure soul energy. The system space was silent. Chapter 2348. Ning Shu dripped a few drops of emerald green liquid onto the golden earthworm and saw it lying on the ground. This time, the child did not open its eyes. It seemed to be in a deep sleep. Its body did not even move. It was curled up and did not seem to have any signs of life. Ning Shu wanted to reach out and touch it, but it was only the size of a thumb. If he did not pay attention, he would crush it. Ning Shu said to the earthworm, "You should keep an eye on it. Why do I feel like something is wrong? It won't wake up or move. It should not be so weak if it was not awake." The earthworm propped itself up and looked at the child in the bud. She did not know much about the golden earthworm and did not know what was going on with the child. She was not familiar with it and was a bit confused. It was nurtured by the soul origin, so it should not be so weak. Ning Shu did not say anything. He left the mine and returned to the system space. He took out some soul stones and a bucket of soul origin liquid and asked 2333 to send it to the main system for purification. Such a big bucket of soul origin liquid must be very rich. If he sold it, how much could he sell it for? Ning Shu seemed to see an endless stream of money. Unfortunately, he had to repair his world first. 2333 sent the soul origin liquid and soul stones away. Ning Shu entered the ultimate martial arts world. He stood on the shore and looked at the rippling law of nothingness. The law of nothingness was very clear. It was said to be clear, but it was actually a little white. With such a bomb in the world, Ning Shu sighed and threw a stone. When the stone fell in, it didn't even cause a splash. It only caused layers of ripples. If she jumped in, she would definitely die. She did not know if anyone had jumped over the law of nothingness. As for 2333's words, she could only say that she was skeptical. But if she jumped in, she would definitely die. Even the insect monster's strong defense could be swallowed. Devouring a soul like hers was not difficult at all. She could not get the star stone. According to the silver-haired man, star stones were not easy to get. Plus, there was an army of souls patrolling the billions of planes. Maybe they could get it. Ning Shu sighed sadly. He looked at the sky at a 45-degree angle. It was not the sky. It was like a layer of fog. If it wasn't for the law of nothingness, a world that had gathered all of its world origins might have already begun to slowly form a world. But there weren't so many ifs. Without the law of nothingness, it was possible that they would all end up dying on the battlefield. In order to save his life, he had sacrificed his peerless martial arts. Now that Ning Shu had obtained a peerless martial art, he thought that it would be better if he didn't do any missions. Instead, he decided to comprehend the law of space. The law of space was very useful. Who knows, he might be able to sneakily steal star stones. Even if he couldn't pry open the star stones, he could still enter the second level of the Nine Palace Mountain. He wondered what surprises were waiting for him on the second level. After arriving at the space city, Ning Shu wasn't in a hurry to enter the city. Instead, he wandered around the space. He wasn't in a hurry at all. In any case, he had plenty of time. If he couldn't get a flash of insight, then he could just accumulate time and comprehend something. He didn't have many things, but he had plenty of time. Ning Shu shuttled through the kaleidoscope-like space. In his hands, he held the insights of the experts that he had bought from the auction. Although he couldn't understand them, he had a high-level game strategy in his hands. He was acting cool and it gave him courage. He felt so awesome. Of course, Ning Shu didn't comprehend anything until 2333 called him back. You didn't do any missions? Ning Shu, Sigma, degree, 2333 had lived for so long that he couldn't even remember the days. I didn't do any missions. You were the one who was teleporting. 2333, don't you know if you did any missions? Don't you have any fucking idea? I thought you went to do a mission. Why are you still here? Ning Shu. I've always been here. After doing a lot of things, he went to mine again. So, after so long, you've only done one mission? 2333 was surprised. Ning Shu. So, what are you thinking about every day? In the past, he could still put on a cold face and act cute in the dark. But now, he didn't even know what was going on. Oh, you have to do a mission. Ning Shu just rolled his eyes. He opened the exchange shop and exchanged for some fasting pills. Then go do a mission. 2333 didn't say anything and sent Ning Shu into the plane. He felt a sense of weightlessness. When his mind cleared, Ning Shu found himself standing in a relatively narrow room in the form of a soul. There was a bed in the room, and a poster of a celebrity was pasted on the bedside. A 7 or 8-year-old girl was lying on the bed. Ning Shu found a chair and sat down. Then he began to receive the plot. This time, Ning Shu's client was this little girl. She was 9 years old, and her identity was this family's adopted daughter. She had an older brother. Ning Shu was very calm in the face of this situation. There were some situations where he couldn't enter the client's body. A body that was less than 14 years old, and a body that was seriously ill. The body was too small. If he squeezed into the body, it would cause wear and tear on the body. The body's lifespan would be greatly reduced. A seriously ill body couldn't withstand the soul coming and going. Fortunately, he had read the rules before and understood this situation. Otherwise, he would have to ask 2333 again. Ning Shu began to receive the plot. This was a matter of etiquette, justice, integrity, and education. This girl, Tong Tong, was adopted. She was not related to this family by blood. Nominally, she was an adopted daughter. However, she might be a child bride prepared for their son. Moreover, what Tong Tong's adoptive father did to Tong Tong was beyond what a father should do. He always liked to touch Tong Tong. Because Tong Tong was adopted, she was afraid of being abandoned again. Therefore, psychologically speaking, she was at a disadvantage. Moreover, she needed to rely on her adoptive father's family for survival. Sometimes, she could only let her adoptive father do whatever he wanted. Tong Tong didn't understand what was wrong. She didn't understand that she was being molested. Also, her brother, who was in puberty, was very curious about a woman's body. Sometimes he would let Tong Tong take off her clothes. No one educated Tong Tong. She vaguely felt that something was wrong, but she was suppressed by the pressure of survival and the fear of being abandoned. When Tong Tong was a little older, he finally did it. Ning Shu furrowed her brows tightly. Tong Tong was still a young child. This was too much of a beast. This family was not particular. They allowed the child to be naked, especially the girl. There was also a mistress. The mistress of this family had a very low sense of existence. She either didn't know what her husband and son were doing to their adopted daughter, or she was blind and turned a blind eye. Ning Shu leaned towards the latter. How could a woman not understand her own family situation and not feel the family atmosphere? Chapter 2349. A girl who has no one to educate her, and because of her inner weakness, she can't refuse others to do bad things to her. Ning Shu held his chin and looked at Tong Tong, who was sleeping on the bed, thinking about this task. He had to ensure that Tong Tong could survive after he left. Now Tong Tong didn't even have the ability to survive. In a big sense, this was the biggest reason why Tong Tong didn't dare to resist subconsciously. Secondly, this kind of thing couldn't be exposed. Tong Tong was just an ignorant girl. If she was exposed by the media, she would only be at a loss in the face of everyone's accusations. She might not even know what she did wrong. Without telling her right or wrong, she would suddenly have to face the eyes of everyone, and even the eyes of contempt. Ning Shu was sitting on a chair in a red coat. The night was very dark, and he looked like a ghost. Ning Shu looked at the alarm clock on the table. It was now the middle of the night. Ning Shu rubbed his arms. He was not used to doing tasks in a soul state. Click. In the night, the sound of the doorknob turning was clearly heard. Ning Shu turned his head and looked at the door. He saw a middle-aged man, who tiptoed in, then gently closed the door and walked to the bedside. He reached out and touched the quilt. Under the scan of his spiritual force, Ning Shu clearly saw where he touched. So disgusting. Tong Tong, who was sleeping, was very uncomfortable. She turned over, but he squeezed onto the small bed and whispered to Tong Tong, "Daughter, Dad will accompany you." Ning Shu. Once a man becomes a beast, even a beast can't resist. Ning Shu directly lifted the man off the bed with his spiritual force. Tong Penghai fell off the bed and his body hit the floor. With a thud, Tong Tong woke up from her sleep. Tong Tong rubbed her eyes and saw Tong Penghai on the ground. She touched her waist and quickly turned on the light. "Dad, why are you under the bed?" "Dad came to see if you kicked the quilt." Tong Penghai patted her and said, "Daddy accidentally fell." "Tong Tong, are you scared? Do you want Daddy to accompany you?" Ning Shu made him slide his foot. This time, Tong Penghai fell to the floor with a plop, and even the floor shook twice. Tong Penghai was a plump and fat middle-aged man. He was a little bald, and his greasy hair was greasy even if he washed it every day. He looked like a disgusting middle-aged man. The weight of this fall was not light. The floor trembled twice, and the movement was very loud. Tong Tong immediately lifted the blanket and got out of bed to help him. What made Ning Shu feel uncomfortable was that Tong Tong was not wearing any clothes, even if it was close-fitting. Ning Shu was speechless. The second fall was more serious, and Tong Penghai couldn't get up for a long time. "What's the matter now? What's going on?" Tong Penghai's wife's hair was loose. She was wearing cotton pajamas that had been washed into balls. Her blonde hair was curly. In fact, Such a hairstyle made her face look even darker and more old-fashioned. "Help me, I can't get up," Tong Pringhai said. Ding Chun glanced at the naked Tong Tong and said, "You go to bed first." Tong Tong obediently climbed into bed and covered herself with the quilt. Ning Shu watched from the side and felt that Tong Tong admired the couple very much. Whether this admiration was forced to survive or real feelings, it was destined that Tong Tong would be an obedient child in this family. What made Ning Shu feel tricky was that Tong Tong didn't feel anything wrong with exposing her private parts in front of others. The existence of clothes was not only to keep warm, but also to cover the body. Unless there were some special customs, this could be done, but in the surrounding environment, Tong Tong's behavior was obviously inappropriate. Ding Chun supported Tong Pringhai, whose waist was hurting, and walked away. She didn't ask why Tong Pringhai was here, and just supported him back to the bedroom. Ning Shu used his spiritual power to check. The two returned to the bedroom and lay down to sleep. During this time, Tong Pringhai felt uncomfortable, so he asked Ding Chun to put a plaster on his back. When applying the plaster, Ding Chun muttered a few times, "It's dark. What are you doing in Tong Tong's room? Tong Tong is our daughter." "I just went to see if Tong Tong kicked the quilt." Tong Pringhai frowned and said. Ding Chun didn't say anything. After applying the plaster, she went to sleep with her back facing Tong Pringhai. This family was a bit strange. There wasn't much affection between the couple. They were just making do with each other, like a pool of stagnant water. As for the 15 or 16-year-old son, he was sleeping soundly. Such a big movement didn't wake him up. Ning Shu crossed his legs and looked at Tong Tong on the bed. Now she was a spiritual body and couldn't see her. He had to let this little girl see him. Ning Shu looked down at himself. He was wearing a red dress, a pale face, and no body. She would probably be scared out of her wits. Ning Shu walked to the bed and drew a talisman on Tong Tong's forehead. This talisman could let Tong Tong see her. It could be said that she had opened her heavenly eye. In order to avoid seeing other floating souls, Ning Shu added another talisman. This way she could only see herself. Then Ning Shu stretched and wandered around the whole house. This was a 90-square-meter house. In fact, it wasn't small, but he didn't know if it was because things were piled up in every corner. The whole house looked very cramped and the kitchen was greasy. The furniture and other things were old. It gave people the feeling that the lighting in the house was not good. It was really uncomfortable to look at. Ning Shu returned to Tong Tong's room and sat in the room until dawn. He greeted Tong Tong, who had just woken up. "Hi." Tong Tong, who had just woken up, was very confused to see a woman appear in front of her. She rubbed her eyes. The woman was still standing in front of her. She was wearing a red dress. Her skin was pale and she was barefoot. Her long hair was tied up with a red rope around her ankles. It was a beautiful sister. "For you. Why are you in my house?" "I'm lost. I can't find my way home, so I came to your house." Ning Shu sat down and said to Tong Tong. Tong Tong looked confused. She didn't realize that Ning Shu was the legendary ghost. "Tong Tong, are you up? Brother will help you put on your clothes." A male duck's voice came from the door. Then there was the sound of the door opening. Tong Tong looked anxious and shouted, "Brother, wait." Then she said to Ning Shu, "Hide." "What do you mean hide?" A boy with a face full of pimples came in. He took the clothes from the bedside and asked Tong Tong to stand up and help her put on her clothes. Tong Tong looked confused. She was standing next to him. Why couldn't he see her? Ning Shu felt that there was a problem with this family's education. "Look at this boy, Tong Tong, get up." Tong Liang lifted the blanket. Chapter 2350. Tong Liang lifted the blanket, and Tong Tong's body was exposed. Ning Shu's frown didn't loosen, and he said to Tong Tong, "You can't do this. A good girl needs to know how to protect herself." When Ning Shu said that, Tong Tong's expression became even more horrified. She asked her brother, "Did you hear anything?" Tong Liang was greedily looking at a woman's body. When he heard his sister's words, he said impatiently, "What sound? There's no sound." As he said that, he wanted to help Tong Tong put on her clothes. Ning Shu said, "Only you can hear my voice." Good girl, you can't do this. After all, she was naked in front of others, so Tong Tong didn't feel good. There was also an inexplicable embarrassment. She quickly pulled the blanket over her body and whispered to Tong Liang, "Brother, I can put it on myself." Tong Liang's expression was not good. He reached out to pull Tong Tong's blanket, but Tong Tong tugged at it. "Brother, I can put it on myself. I've grown up." Tong Liang's face was full of acne. "How can you be so ungrateful? I'm helping you put on your clothes and you're still like this." Tong Tong helplessly tugged at the blanket and looked at Ning Shu. Tong Liang comforted her in a soft voice, "Put on your clothes properly. Be good and I'll buy you ice cream. If you're not obedient, you're not a good child. Mom and Dad will throw you away." Tong Tong trembled. She was afraid that she would be abandoned. She immediately said, "Brother, don't throw me away. I'll be good." "That's right." Tong Liang helped his sister put on her underwear. That wretched expression made Ning Shu want to punch him in the face. No, he wanted to dirty his hands. Moreover, he couldn't create a violent female ghost in front of the little girl. It would hurt her family and even her, making the little girl afraid of her. This time, she was here to be an understanding sister. She had to be gentle, generous, beautiful, and dignified. Tong Tong's summer clothes were mostly skirts, and she only had a few pants. Some people's dirty thoughts could be exposed from their clothes, because skirts were convenient. Girls looked beautiful in skirts. Tong Liang helped his sister put on her clothes before leaving the bedroom in satisfaction. Tong Tong turned around and glanced at Ning Shu, who was standing by the bed. She wanted to say something but was pulled away by her brother. Ning Shu watched silently, especially when he saw the way Tong Liang looked at the little girl. Sooner or later he would dig those eyes out. Ding Chun was wearing pajamas and had prepared breakfast. Breakfast was steamed buns, fried dough sticks, and porridge. "Tong Tong, come and sit with Daddy." Tong Prenghai saw his adopted daughter and immediately waved at her. Ning Shu followed him out of the bedroom and heard Tong Prenghai emphasizing the word, "sit." "Sit and do?" Even a ghost like her would be afraid of him. Tong Tong obediently sat next to Tong Prenghai and called him father. Tong Prenghai looked at Tong Tong kindly, but in Ning Shu's eyes, Tong Prenghai was disgusting no matter how he looked at him. Tong Prenghai was a pervert, and this kind of thing was common. In some places, it was superstitious to do it with young girls to get promoted and get rich. From officials to businessmen, the thing they liked to do the most was to hurt girls who were not 15 or 16 years old. Some superstitious customs were too scary. Ning Shu was quite suspicious of the Tong family's purpose in adopting Tong Tong. "Come, eat more and go to school. If anyone bullies you in school, Daddy will stand up for you." Tong Prenghai picked up a fried dough stick for his adopted daughter while his other hand touched between her legs, gently caressing her. Tong Tong felt uncomfortable, but she didn't dare to say anything. She turned around and saw Ning Shu standing not far away, looking at her with a pair of calm eyes. There was no expression, but Tong Tong felt very complicated. She couldn't describe what she was feeling, but under his gaze, she seemed to be experiencing something very embarrassing. "Ning Shu, silly girl, don't give your body to others." But this silly girl didn't understand at all. Ning Shu rolled his eyes and knocked over the bowl of porridge in front of Tong Prenghai. The whole bowl fell off the table and landed on Tong Prenghai's crotch. The porridge had just been scooped up, and this time, it landed on his crotch. Tong Prenghai was so shocked that he jumped up from the chair and quickly patted the boiling hot porridge. It was wet and it looked like he had wet his pants. Probably because it was too hot, Tong Prenghai directly took off his belt and pants, and then rushed into the bedroom to change his pants. When he came out again, he shouted at Ding Chun with a bad expression, "Can't you eat the porridge after it's cold? It's so hot, how can I eat it?" Ding Chun, of course, knew that her husband was venting his anger on her. She shouted irritably, "The bowl is in front of you, and who knows where your hands are? You can't even hold the bowl. Crazy!" Tong Prenghai seemed to have been stabbed in his sore spot. He didn't want to argue with his wife and sat down to eat again. This time, Tong Prenghai didn't touch her again. Tong Tong held the chopsticks in one hand and put her left hand on her leg to press down her skirt. She was in a state of alert. Tong Liang didn't care about what was happening at the table. He swallowed his breakfast and didn't say anything about his parents' argument. However, if they continued to argue, Tong Liang would probably flip the table and shout that they were so annoying and that they didn't want to eat anymore. Ning Shu narrowed his eyes and looked at everything on the table. His eyes focused on Ding Chun. Ding Chun should be well aware of it, but she didn't say anything. She knew the behavior of her husband and son. She was a silent person, and her attitude towards Tong Tong was also indifferent. She didn't particularly love or mistreat Tong Tong. She was a silent and calm bystander. Maybe she was angry in her heart, but maybe there were various reasons that made her shut her mouth and choose to ignore it. However, if Tong Tong hurt her husband and son, Tong Tong would face difficulties and oppression from the mistress of the house. Moreover, Ding Chun would often warn Tong Tong that she shouldn't tell anyone about her family's affairs. Even if people asked, she should say that her parents were very good to her. So the situation of this family of three was really strange. It was indescribably oppressive. Tong Tong wanted to be an obedient child. Even if her adoptive father and brother did something strange to her, Tong Tong wouldn't say it, and she definitely wouldn't tell anyone at school. In fact, Ding Chun was actually quietly cleaning up the mess for her husband and son. Ning Shu grinned and finally looked at Tong Tong. This mission was actually not easy to do. After all, Tong Tong was too young. It was easier to impart her ideas. However, because she was too young, she didn't have the ability to survive. Of course, she could create any accident to kill Tong Penghai. However, if Tong Penghai died, or if the whole family died, then how would Tong Tong survive? If Tong Tong did something extreme, Tong Penghai would definitely abandon her. Chapter 2351. As for the public scrutiny, it was too late. Once the door was closed, no one would know what was going on in the family. Furthermore, he had pushed Tong Tong in front of everyone and made her receive strange looks. Tong Tong still had to go to school. At school, she would be ridiculed and ridiculed by the children. There was no benefit in exposing this matter. People were only interested in the drama for 3 days. After 3 days, they would completely forget about it. Other than being laughed at or called a beast, it was useless to Tong Tong. It couldn't solve the fundamental problem. Tong Tong, are you done eating? Daddy will send you to school, Tong Penghai said to Tong Tong with a smile. If Tong Penghai was Tong Tong's biological father and there were no dirty things going on between them, perhaps Tong Penghai would be a very good father. However, this attentiveness was mixed with disgust. It was the attentiveness of a man to a woman. As for what was behind this attentiveness, everyone knew. Ding Chun's lips moved, but she didn't say anything in the end. She watched as Tong Penghai held Tong Tong's hand and walked out. I'm leaving too. Tong Penghai's car was an old Santana. The car looked a little dirty. Tong Tong opened the door and wanted to sit in the back. Tong Penghai said to Tong Tong, sit in the front. Tong Tong was a little hesitant. Seeing her father's face darken, as if he was about to get angry, she quickly sat in the front passenger seat. Ning Shu sat in the back and looked at the car. Anyway, there was something black in the car. He didn't know if it was chewing gum or snot. Even though he was in spirit form, Ning Shu felt a little uncomfortable. Thinking back to how he had survived in the junkyard, this discomfort was directed at the owner of the car. Daddy, look, there's a sister in the back. Tong Tong pointed behind. What sister? Tong Penghai looked back at the back seat. There was no one. There's clearly a sister in a red dress sitting in our car. Tong Tong didn't understand. Why could she see the sister, but her parents and brother ignored her? There's no one. Don't talk nonsense. Tong Penghai was scared by Tong Tong's serious expression. Ning Shu blinked at the puzzled Tong Tong. Only you can see me and hear my voice. I will stay by your side to protect you. Tong Tong still didn't understand and wanted to say something. Ning Shu put his index finger to his lips and shook his head at Tong Tong. Tong Tong stopped talking, but she felt her father put his hand on her lap again. She was going into her skirt. With one hand on the steering wheel, Tong Penghai's other hand misbehaved. While driving multitasking. There were cameras everywhere on the road. Maybe they would capture it and seek excitement? Ning Shu supported his chin with his hand and squinted his eyes. He began to evaporate the air around Tong Pinghai's crotch area, evaporating the moisture in the air and raising the temperature of the air. Hiss! Tong Pinghai suddenly felt extremely hot and painful. He couldn't help but want to cover it. Could it be that the bowl of porridge in the morning was too hot? It felt like his skin was about to peel off. Dad, what's wrong? Tong Tong's body leaned forward because of the sudden breaking. Seeing her adoptive father in pain, she asked anxiously. Tong Tong, go to school by yourself. Daddy has something to do. Tong Pinghai felt that he had to go to the hospital. There must be blisters, and it was in that area. It was so embarrassing. Tong Tong was pushed out of the car with a confused face. She watched the car drive away and ate a mouthful of exhaust gas. Ning Shu stood beside Tong Tong. Tong Tong turned to Ning Shu and asked, Are you an angel? Ning Shu, have you ever seen an angel in a red shirt? She was afraid that he wasn't an angel, but a sinkhole. I am whatever you think I am, Ning Shu said. Tong Tong asked as she walked to school, Then do you have superpowers? Can you save the world? Can you make beautiful Barbie dolls? Ning Shu, I can't do any of those things. Tong Tong looked at Ning Shu's feet. Don't your feet hurt when you don't wear shoes? It's fine. Am I really the only one who can see you? Tong Tong reached out to touch Ning Shu, but it felt like jelly. No, you can't see me. Look here, no one is looking at me, Ning Shu said. Then why did you come to me? Tong Tong seemed to have found someone to talk to, and she chattered non-stop along the way. She seemed to have a lot of questions, and Ning Shu answered them all. Tong Tong finally showed some of the youthful energy of a young girl. I'm going to school. Do you want to come with me? Tong Tong asked. Yes, I'll go with you. Ning Shu wanted to get familiar with this little girl first, and then slowly influence her. If he started lecturing her like a teacher, she might not accept it. Then what should I call you? What's your name? Why can't people see you? Don't you have a family? Ning Shu. Just call me Angel. Tong Tong didn't seem to realize that she was a ghost. Angel? Do you have wings? Ning Shu. I'm a broken-winged angel. Tong Tong looked at Ning Shu sympathetically. He was a quiet and obedient child at home, but now he was a lot more lively. Even though Tong Tong didn't understand some things, these things still left a shadow in her heart. When they arrived at school, Tong Tong looked at Ning Shu reluctantly. I'm at school. You have to go. No one can see me. I'll go with you, Ning Shu said. Is that really okay? Tong Tong smiled. Her fair face was very cute. Ning Shu nodded and followed Tong Tong to the classroom. Then, Tong Tong began to clean the classroom with a broom. Tong Tong was only in the 4th grade. 4th grade. A little boy walked to Tong Tong's side, lifted Tong Tong's skirt, and ran away. Then he looked at Tong Tong with a smile. Tong Tong's face was bright red. She pressed down on her skirt with both hands. Ning Shu narrowed his eyes and said to Tong Tong, Pick up the broom and hit him. I don't dare. When a girl encountered such a situation, her face would at most turn red. The little boy might be playing a prank. However, this world was too kind to the wicked and too cruel to the kind. Sometimes, they would rather everyone be afraid than be bullied by everyone. It was human nature to bully the weak and fear the strong. It was the instinct of all living creatures to avoid harm. Do you want him to lift your skirt every time? Ning Shu asked. But I don't dare. The teacher will punish me. When I call my parents will be angry and abandon me. Tong Tong's face was very pale. She looked very scared. Ning Shu smiled. Don't be afraid. I'll protect you. Your parents won't abandon you. At least your father won't abandon you. Tong Pinghai definitely wouldn't abandon Tong Tong. Chapter 2352. But my brother always says that Mom and Dad are going to abandon me. Tong Tong said. He's just scaring you. Pick up the broom and beat that naughty little fatty. Why does he bully you every time? Because you never dare to fight back. If the teacher asks, Just say that you saw a man touching a woman on the bus and everyone on the last bus beat him up. Ning Shu said slowly. Tong Tong's head was spinning as she listened. A voice seduced her, making her feel both fear and yearning. She saw the boy standing at the door of the classroom, laughing at her. Tong Tong picked up the broom on the ground and rushed toward the boy at the door. The boy was a bit confused. He couldn't figure out what the girl was going to do. He just stood at the door and didn't move. Tong Tong picked up the broom and hit the boy a few times. The boy cried out and wanted to fight back. Perhaps because there was an angel protecting her, Tong Tong's heart was filled with unprecedented courage. She grabbed the broom and kept hitting the boy. The boy couldn't fight back at all and ran away. Tong Tong's face was red and her eyes were shining. Although she had done something bad, Tong Tong's heart was unprecedentedly happy and carefree. Go and apologize to the teacher. After all, you did something wrong. Tell the teacher properly. Remember what I taught you before. Ning Shu said. Once she heard the word teacher, Tong Tong instantly felt like a bucket of ice water was poured on her. She immediately shrank back. It's okay. I'll go with you, Ning Shu said calmly. After doing something bad, she still had to stand on the side of reason. Tong Tong put down the broom and went to the teacher's office. She hesitated at the door before going in. Ning Shu stood behind the head teacher and taught Tong Tong word by word. Tong Tong stuttered. The head teacher heard the student talk about the bus incident. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She just said, fighting is wrong. If you encounter this kind of thing in the future, don't fight. Okay, you can go. Thank you. Tong Tong breathed a sigh of relief. The teacher didn't think much of it. She just felt that the student had done something wrong and hurried over to apologize. In the future, when you go to school, wear pants if you can. You can wear skirts at home. The head teacher was a female teacher. She looked reasonable. Okay. After leaving the office, Tong Tong's entire body went limp. She said to Ning Shu in disbelief, "That's it? I thought we were going to call our parents." "It's fine now." "Thank you, Angel." Ning Shu smiled. For a brat like that, even if he told the teacher, it would be useless. He would still do what he wanted to do in private. After beating him up once, he would be scared and would not dare to do anything. If that did not work, he would beat him up again. It doesn't matter even if you call your parents. It was only Tong Tong who was scared and thought that he would abandon her. Tong Penghai had not achieved his goal and only had an extra pair of chopsticks at home. He would not abandon Tong Tong. Moreover, Tong Tong had been raised by him for so long that he could not bear to abandon her. The boy was hit by the broom first. Although it didn't hurt much, the broom was dirty. Tong Tong dared to hit him with it. The person who had been bullied by him dared to retaliate now, indicating that he was very angry. Then, he was called to the office and told that if he were to lift a female classmate's skirt in the future, his parents would have to write a self-reflection letter. The boy was very angry. After hitting him with the broom, he actually complained to the teacher. The boy now had a deep understanding of the saying, "The guilty party complains first." Angrily running to the classroom, Ning Shu said to Tong Tong, "Smile, don't be weak." Tong Tong had no choice but to smile at the boy. However, because of her nervousness and timidity, her smile was a little twisted. In the boy's eyes, Tong Tong's smile was a fake one. It was quite ferocious. Could it be that she was possessed by a ghost? The boy bravely walked in front of Tong Tong. "You actually dared to complain to the teacher. If you have the guts, don't leave after school." Tong Tong's heart trembled. Ning Shu looked at Tong Tong encouragingly. Tong Tong smiled. "Do you want me to hit you with the broom a few more times?" The boy resentfully returned to his seat and used his eyes to kill Tong Tong. Tong Tong smiled at Ning Shu. Ning Shu was bored to death. He sat by the window and watched Tong Tong go to class. She was learning some simple things. Ning Shu simply lay down and slept. He didn't go to Tong Tong's side until the class was over. After the skirt lifting incident, Tong Tong had become much closer to Ning Shu. At home, her adoptive father and brother would touch her, but at school, every time her skirt was lifted, it would cause a roar of laughter. Even the female classmates would laugh at her. Tong Tong vaguely felt that there was something wrong with her father's actions, but she didn't have the courage to resist. Ning Shu followed Tong Tong to the bathroom. Ning Shu asked Tong Tong, "Do you know why there's a male and female bathroom?" Tong Tong thought for a moment and said, "There's a difference between men and women." "Yes, there's a difference between men and women. Otherwise, men and women can use the same bathroom." Ning Shu said, "Your body is your property. You have the right to use it. It's not something that others can profane." Tong Tong didn't say anything. Ning Shu guessed that she didn't understand. Ning Shu, who was accompanying her on the first day, felt very bored. After school, Ning Shu asked Tong Tong, "Do you know where the nearest bookstore is?" "No, I'll show you." Tong Tong took Ning Shu to a rental bookstore. It was a small bookstore. Most of the books were low-quality pirated books. The quality of the paper was very poor. The books were either bosom friends, youth pain in the ass, or love letters. Looking at the cover, it felt very erotic. Ning Shu said, "There's no proper library." Ning Shu felt that Tong Tong should know her body well. There were parts of her body that couldn't be exposed. "I don't know where the library is. Even if there is one, it should be very far away. I remember going there once. The teacher took us there by car," Tong Tong said. But Tong Tong returned home. There was no one at home. Her mother, who was usually at home, wasn't there either. Ning Shu guessed what had happened. Tong Pinghai's fever was a bit serious. At most, there would be blisters. Ning Shu knew the temperature. After all, it was impossible for a bowl of porridge to cause a large burn. "Do you want to eat something? I'll find something for you to eat," Tong Tong asked Ning Shu. In other people's eyes, Tong Tong looked like a crazy person who was talking to the air. It was a bit scary. Ning Shu shook his head. "I don't eat." "Then what do you eat?" Ning Shu thought, "Soul." It would probably scare Tong Tong. Tong Tong saw that her family hadn't returned yet. She did her homework first. When she finished, she started to cook. Ding Chun came back after dark. She looked at Tong Tong and said, "Your father is in the hospital. What happened to Dad?" Tong Tong was surprised. He was fine when he sent her to school in the morning. Chapter 2353. Ding Chun didn't want to tell her daughter that there were blisters there. She might have trouble walking, and she couldn't wear pants. She might burst the blisters. Ding Chun was a bit confused. It was just porridge. How could it be so serious? Coincidentally, that area was scalded red and blistered. Tong Tong was a bit confused, but she still said, "Mom, I've already prepared dinner." Ding Chun ate some food and went to the hospital. She would be discharged tomorrow. "Dad, what's wrong with her?" Tong Tong asked Ning Shu. In her impression, this angel with broken wings should know everything. Ning Shu said, "She's just sick. You should eat." While they were talking, Tong Liang, whose face was full of pimples, came back. He was probably playing games outside and didn't come back until dawn. Tong Tong hurriedly told her brother that her father was sick and was in the hospital. Tong Liang just frowned and stared at Tong Tong without saying anything. He went into the room and closed the door. Tong Tong was a bit disappointed. She felt that she couldn't fit in with this family. She knew clearly that she was adopted and not her parents' biological child. Ning Shu told Tong Tong to eat and went back to his room. He then locked the door. The moment she went back to her room, Tong Tong took off all her clothes. Ning Shu didn't know what to say. "You should wear clothes. Below your collarbone and below your navel are your private parts. You can't show them to others," Ning Shu said. "Wear a pair of hot pants and a t-shirt," Ning Shu said. "But Dad said that we can relax at home. There aren't so many rules. Also, Dad said that it's more comfortable to sleep with clothes off." Ning Shu said, "Then you still have to wear clothes." Tong Tong obediently took out the hot pants and t-shirt and put them on. Then she was about to sleep when she saw Ning Shu standing by the bed. "Why don't you come up and sleep too?" Ning Shu thought about it and squeezed onto the small bed. That night, Ning Shu talked until his mouth was sore. He explained the differences between the sexes, the structure of the body, and how people were born. When it came to clapping for love, Ning Shu explained in detail that certain behaviors between relatives were out of line and were not allowed. It wasn't just about ethics and morality. Even if they weren't biological children, it was also legal. This kind of union would produce deformed offspring. Furthermore, Tong Tong was young. It was simply destroying her body. Tong Tong's face turned pale. What about Dad? But what should I do? Tong Tong hugged herself and shivered. If I don't be a good child, Daddy won't want me anymore. At the end of the day, it was all about survival. If it wasn't for survival, everyone would want to live with dignity and dignity. However, reality couldn't be rejected or refuted. You have to wear clothes when you sleep, whether it's in the bedroom or the living room. Ning Shu stroked Tong Tong's hair. You have to learn to protect yourself. Girls are always the ones who get hurt. When are you free? Go to the library and have a look. Ning Shu felt that Tong Tong's situation was because she didn't have a family to teach her. Not only that, but they were also distorting Tong Tong's views. Which family's girl was 8 or 9 years old and didn't wear clothes? Kachaka. There was the sound of the doorknob twisting. Tong Tong, why did you lock the door? Open the door. Tong Liang knocked on the door. Open the door. I want to come in. Tong Tong wanted to speak, but Ning Shu covered her mouth. He scanned with his spiritual power and saw that Tong Liang at the door was a little excited. His breathing was rapid and his pants were pushed up. He was holding a phone in his hand. The pictures on the phone were of beauties wearing very little. It seemed that he was stimulated. Adolescent children couldn't stand stimulation. Don't open the door. This is your room, Ning Shu said to Tong Tong. If Tong Tong opened the door, who knew what would happen tonight, especially when there were no parents at home? Boys at this age would secretly look at stimulating things from various sources, such as books, comics, and discs. Then they lacked the right guidance. Tong Tong, open the door quickly. Tong Liang knocked on the door very loudly. Even if she was sleeping soundly, she would wake up. Tong Liang was so angry that he kicked the door with his feet and scolded, saying that he would throw Tong Tong away. Tong Tong hid in the quilt, trembling all over. She was very scared and almost begged Ning Shu, or open the door. Ning Shu stared at Tong Tong. What do you think will happen if you open the door? There is no adult at home. If there was a first time, there would be a second time. With Tong Tong as a convenient tool, Tong Liang wouldn't let go of it. And Tong Tong was only 9 years old now. Her body was very young. And Tong Liang was not 18 years old yet. He was a minor. As for the legal punishment, Tong Liang was afraid of his brother outside and was afraid of being abandoned. He was also afraid of facing Ning Shu's quiet and dignified eyes. He covered his head with the quilt and cried in the quilt. Tong Liang, who was at the door, saw that his sister refused to open the door. He had no choice but to shout that he would find the key and put it against the door. He would teach her a lesson when the time came. Tong Liang didn't look for the key. Instead, he went back to his room and did it himself. His face was full of pimples and was in a daze. Ning Shu only felt disgusted. Sex was beautiful. It was an important ability for reproduction. It was accompanied by a few seconds of pleasure. Therefore, people developed all kinds of fetishes. Ning Shu wanted to show this scene to Tong Tong, but after thinking about it, he decided against it. Sometimes, you never know what you will face when you open a door. Maybe you know it, but you still want to open Pandora's box. The next morning, Tong Liang knocked on Tong Tong's door again. Tong Tong's eyes were red and swollen. She didn't sleep much last night. When Tong Liang knocked on the door, Tong Tong had already put on her clothes and found a pair of pants to wear. You put it on yourself? Tong Liang frowned. The pimples on his face were a little white. Ning Shu was disgusted and eager to squeeze the pimples. I knocked on the door last night. Why didn't you open the door? Tong Liang asked unhappily. I didn't hear it. I fell asleep. Brother, what did you call me for? Tong Tong quietly moved away from her brother. Tong Liang didn't notice Tong Tong's distance. He irritably ordered Tong Tong, hurry up and cook. I'm hungry. Tong Liang kept staring at Tong Tong in the kitchen. Ning Shu was puzzled. Tong Tong wasn't like the beautiful girl in the photo on Tong Liang's phone. She hadn't even started to develop yet, but he was staring at Tong Tong. Little boys like mature women, but Tong Penghai likes young women. Tong Tong cooked 2 bowls of noodles. Tong Liang ate and said to Tong Tong, "Don't lock the door at night. If there's a next time, I'll ask Dad to break the lock." Chapter 2354. Last night, Tong Liang's head was filled with blood. He went to knock on Tong Tong's door. When he calmed down, he felt both scared and angry. He was angry that the wretched girl locked the door. "Don't close the door again, do you hear me?" Tong Liang threatened Tong Tong. "Or I'll throw you away." "Yes, I won't lock the door again," Tong Tong said immediately. He wanted to pick the lock and throw her away. Tong Tong didn't know if it was true or not, but she was very scared. Tong Liang snorted. Ning Shu watched from the side and didn't say anything. Tong Tong was too scared of being abandoned. She couldn't even think about whether it was true or not. Just a scare would make her like a bird startled by the twang of a bough. Obedience and fear that had lasted for so long could not be changed overnight. Ding Chun didn't educate Tong Tong. After all, Tong Tong wasn't her biological daughter. She didn't expect her to treat her well. It was probably because of her husband, so Ding Chun didn't say some things at all. Tong Liang was her son, but she didn't educate him. It was reasonable to say that boys should be taught by their father. But look at Tong Penghai's behavior. So, in this family, everyone knew. The only one who didn't understand should be Tong Tong. Ning Shu felt that he should teach Tong Tong more about her ability to protect herself. For example, fighting skills, taekwondo, or how to protect herself when she was in danger. She should attack the opponent's weakness to survive. Tong Liang was so scared that he wouldn't dare to lock the door in the future. He hoped that a certain level of martial arts could increase his courage a little. As for Tong Penghai, who raised Tong Tong, he probably had a kind of attitude. He gave her food, clothes, and education. She was his everything. He could do anything for her. All of it. Tong Tong lowered her head and ate her noodles. Tong Liang finished a bowl of noodles and said to Tong Tong that he wanted to go to the hospital to see his father. Tong Tong only ate half a bowl. She could only leave the table and go with Tong Liang. Tong Tong looked back at Ning Shu and found that Ning Shu was following. This time, she was relieved. Tong Liang walked in front and impatiently asked her to hurry up. Ning Shu glanced at Tong Liang. Now that Tong Liang was in his adolescence, he was a little impatient in everything he did. He looked like he was very arrogant at any time. In Ning Shu's mind, boys at this age shouldn't be wearing white shirts. Their lips were starting to grow fluffy, but they were candid and looked full of vigor in white shirts. From Tong Liang, Ning Shu only saw disgust. It was normal to be impulsive during puberty, and they would find other things to divert their attention. However, Tong Liang seemed to be addicted to it, addicted to sex. Now, he even wanted to set his sights on his little sister, a girl who was not even 14 years old. Tong Liang called to ask which hospital Ding Chun was in, and then took Tong Tong to take the bus. Ning Shu stood beside Tong Tong and said, "You should learn something to protect yourself. If you're hurt, you might get pregnant." Tong Tong said, "Your life has just begun. You are still a flower bud that has yet to bloom into a beautiful flower." The flower of the motherland was pinched just like that. "I don't want to," Tong Tong shouted. The people in the bus stared at her in surprise. Tong Liang was a little disgusted by Tong Tong's embarrassment. He asked with a straight face, "What did you do? Are you crazy?" "Nothing. You're so weird. When we reach the hospital, you should also have your brain checked." Tong Liang didn't have much care for this little sister. Perhaps it was because he knew that this little sister was adopted, so he was more or less unscrupulous and didn't care about her feelings. Tong Tong lowered her head, tears welling up in her eyes. She looked at him and shivered, afraid that she would be hurt, and afraid that she would be abandoned. Ning Shu looked at the cars coming and going outside. All the entanglement and pain was because Tong Tong couldn't survive on her own. She had to rely on the Tong family to survive. However, relying on the Tong family might cause unavoidable harm to her life. Not to mention finding a man to marry and have children in the future. Once she was trapped and couldn't struggle out, Tong Penghai would never allow Tong Tong to be out of his control. The kindness of raising her had to be repaid with her body. He raised her and got her. There was nothing wrong with the logic. Tong Penghai had already regarded Tong Tong as his possession. Tong Tong was his. Therefore, if Tong Tong didn't resist, it was obvious what kind of existence she would become in the future. She would always be Tong Penghai's exclusive property without any room for resistance. If she resisted, she would definitely be suppressed and couldn't live a normal life for the rest of her life. Tong Tong couldn't live a normal life. Ning Shu looked at Tong Tong with some melancholy. Earn money to support herself, go shopping, buy clothes, fall in love with the person she liked, and form a family. It was a very normal thing for ordinary people, but it was unattainable for Tong Tong. As long as Tong Tong had the ability to survive, she could leave this family in minutes. However, how could a 9-year-old child survive? Solving Tong Peng and Ning Shu easily solved the problem. However, Tong Tong's survival would be a problem after she left. Tong Tong saw Ning Shu staring at her with melancholy and wanted to cry even more. She got off the bus and said to Ning Shu, "Am I very useless?" "No, it's not your fault." Ning Shu said. It could only be said that Tong Tong was born in a quagmire. First, she was abandoned by her biological parents. Then, she was adopted by such a family. Sometimes, you wanted to break free from the quagmire, but you fell deeper and deeper. In the end, you couldn't move and were swallowed by it. You gave up struggling and accepted your broken fate. "Angel, what should I do? If I don't obey Dad, he will drive me away. But if I obey, I will be hurt. If I resist, Dad will still drive me away." Tong Tong asked confusedly, "Why does Dad treat me like this?" God knows why. It was a game for adults, but these adults stretched their hands to young children. Everyone had a demon living in their heart, and it was hard to say when this demon would rush out. When they arrived at the hospital ward, Tong Penghai was lying on the bed and Ding Chun was feeding him. When Tong Penghai saw Tong Tong, he was very happy. He quickly waved for Tong Tong to come over. Tong Tong looked at Ning Shu. Ning Shu nodded. Tong Penghai didn't dare to do anything in public. It should be known that Tong Penghai was very sanctimonious outside. He looked like a successful person. Tong Tong walked over. Tong Penghai grabbed Tong Tong's hand and asked her a few questions. He asked if Tong Tong had eaten at home, if she had slept well, if she missed her father, and so on. If he didn't know that Tong Tong was an adopted daughter, he would have to praise him for being such a good father. However, Tong Penghai only dared to hold her hand. He didn't dare to do anything in the hospital. /BK. Chapter 2355. Tong Penghai asked Tong Tong to stay and take care of him. How could a child like Tong Tong take care of Tong Penghai? Tong Penghai even asked Tong Tong, "Tong Tong, are you willing to stay and take care of Dad?" Tong Tong could only accept Tong Penghai's request. Even if she felt that it was difficult, she would still nod and agree. Ding Chun frowned and said, "The horse is about to be discharged. Why do you want Tong Tong to stay here?" "I can't be careless with my injury, so I have to stay for a few more days," Tong Penghai said impatiently. Upon closer inspection, this impatient expression was very similar to Tong Liang's. Tong Penghai was probably tired of his wife and didn't want a divorce, so he dragged it on. Ding Chun was probably the same. There was no love between husband and wife. They could only muddle along and live peacefully. To be honest, the atmosphere between the couple made Ning Shu feel very depressed. They had been married for more than 10 years. They had lived half of their lives and the rest of their lives. Living together like this was really suffocating and terrifying. Although it was calm, there was no sign of life. Although it was calm, there was no pressure. There was no love between them. They could only muddle along and live their lives together. They were over 50 years old and didn't want to suffer anymore. At Ding Chun's age, if she divorced again, she would definitely be ridiculed. Moreover, she was no longer in her youth. If she wanted to marry again, she would probably have to choose the tallest person among the shorties. It was better to muddle along like this. How long had it been? If they were mission enforcers, they would have existed for even longer. There would also be a day when their love faded. However, mission enforcers' love faded. They could separate, but there wouldn't be so many obstacles and considerations like this. Reality was very helpless. Ding Chun knew her husband's behavior. She didn't stop him or say anything. She was probably afraid of causing trouble and making the whole family restless. When a woman reached this age, she could only show off her family, how much her husband earned, and how good her children's grades were. If these no longer existed, it would be a blow to a woman. She would lose all her face. Ding Chun's silence seemed to be normal. It's not that serious. Go back and recuperate. It costs money to stay in the hospital for a day. There's no work. We don't have so much money to let you stay in the hospital leisurely, Ding Chun said. She split the money into 2 pieces. Ding Chun couldn't stand staying in the hospital when she could be discharged. Okay, let's go, said. Tong Liang, on the other hand, didn't care about what was going on here at all. He sat on the chair and played with his phone. In this family, the father was kind and the son was not filial. Kinship seemed to be very indifferent. It was a depressing family. Ning Shu felt that there were many such families. Because of all kinds of realistic choices and compromises, they lived under the same roof, but it was unknown whether their hearts were the same. Tong Tong heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. Finally, she didn't have to take care of her father in the hospital. She was willing to take care of her father, but when she held his hand and touched it, Tong Tong felt goosebumps all over her body. She already knew some things and knew that she couldn't do this, but she couldn't resist her father. Ning Shu was not optimistic about this at all. In the hospital, Tong Penghai might restrain himself a little, but at home, he did not know what would happen. Although the tool was damaged, he could still touch it. Ning Shu's face was cold as he sighed. Most likely, after they returned, Tong Penghai would still have to ask Tong Tong to take care of him. After the discharge procedures were completed, the family and Ning Shu went home. When they met acquaintances in the neighborhood, they only said that they were sick. It was a cold, so they went to the hospital to get a drip. They couldn't say that they were scalded. When they returned home, Tong Penghai said, "In the future, I will only bring the food to the table when it's cold. I will not be polite to anyone who brings hot food to the table." Tong Penghai needed someone to support him when he walked. He was afraid of rubbing his wound, so he opened his legs and swayed like a duck. He went back to his room and lay down to rest. Tong Tong, pour a glass of water for Dad. Dad is thirsty. Tong Penghai shouted in the house. When they came back, Tong Liang hid in his room. Ding Chun took the basket and went out to buy groceries. Tong Tong had no choice but to pour water. When she reached the door, she was a little hesitant and said to Ning Shu, "I'm a little scared." She felt as if she was going to enter a demon's den and enter the mouth of a monster, never to come out again. "I'll go with you." Tong Tong carried the glass of water in. The curtains were drawn, so the room was a little dark. "Tong Tong, come quickly." Tong Penghai asked Tong Tong to feed him the water. "Ning Shu. 3 legs are injured, not a cripple. Tong Tong, give Dad a massage. Dad is in so much pain," Tong Penghai said. Tong Tong's hand trembled and the glass almost fell to the ground. Ning Shu laughed coldly and saw the confusion and fear on Tong Tong's face. Sometimes he didn't know if it was lucky or not to let Tong Tong understand some things. If she didn't know, she would be confused and confused. If she knew, she would be even more confused. Ning Shu put his hand behind his back and snapped his fingers. It seemed that it wasn't painful enough and he still needed someone to rub it. Tong Penghai was just saying. It was scalded and blisters were painful. How could he let Tong Tong rub it? Hiss, it seemed that his pants had rubbed against a blister. It was so painful. "Dad, are you okay?" Tong Tong saw that Tong Penghai's face was pale and his face was twitching. She quickly asked, "Tong Tong, Dad is in so much pain. Blow on it for Dad." Tong Penghai gritted his teeth and said, "Things like burns couldn't be healed in a short time." Tong Tong's eyes widened. "Dad, that's not good." "What's not good about it? This place is the same as the hands, the head, and the feet. They are all parts of the body. Blow on it for Dad." Tong Penghai said, "Ning Shu." It seemed that it wasn't too painful. Ning Shu snapped his fingers again and the blister burst. It was so painful that Tong Penghai gasped and his head was covered in sweat. Tong Tong was at a loss. She held the glass of water and stood by the bed in confusion. Ding Chun came back from grocery shopping and saw Tong Penghai in so much pain. She asked Tong Tong, "What happened?" Tong Tong was about to cry. "I don't know. Dad said it was very painful. Did you touch his wound?" Ding Chun's face was a little gloomy. "I didn't touch Dad. I just gave Dad some water." "Okay, you can go out. Your dad has blisters. Don't touch him, okay?" Ding Chun asked Tong Tong to go out. Tong Tong hurried out. Ning Shu stayed in the room for a while. He saw Ding Chun applying medicine for Tong Penghai, but Tong Penghai was in a lot of pain. Ding Chun's tone was a little resentful. "Why don't you behave at a time like this? Why don't you send Tong Tong away? Where are you going to send her? She's already part of our family. She's registered," Tong Penghai said sternly. His face was twisted with pain and anger. /BK. Chapter 2356. Ding Chun's gloomy face made her gloomy face look even worse. Tong Penghai didn't even want to look at her. Ning Shu listened to the couple's conversation and quietly floated out of the room. "I thought you disappeared." Tong Tong saw Ning Shu come in and close the door. Ning Shu said to Tong Tong, "I'll teach you some taekwondo and some knowledge to protect yourself." Ning Shu demonstrated to Tong Tong, "Look carefully." Tong Tong couldn't go to any taekwondo class or learn any fighting skills. Tong Penghai would never allow it. He wouldn't let Tong Tong have the power to resist him. Ning Shu first had Tong Tong do the horse stance to train her strength and put a book on Tong Tong's head. Then Ning Shu sat down and began to write the sutras for the ultimate kung fu. There was little spiritual energy in the modern world, but using the ultimate kung fu could still strengthen the body. Tong Tong's face was red from holding in the horse stance. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore and sat on the ground. The book on her head also fell. "I'm too tired," Tong Tong said weakly. "Rest for a while and then continue." The ultimate kung fu could strengthen the body, but it was only internal energy. It was useless if you didn't use any moves. Therefore, Tong Tong still had to learn some moves. When a person had a certain amount of capital and power, they had the power to resist things they didn't want to do. They had the confidence to say no to things they didn't want to do. Tong Tong was confused and asked, "Angel, why do I have to learn this?" "Because it will give you the power to protect yourself," Ning Shu said without looking up. Tong Tong was now in the stage of following blindly. She did whatever she was told and didn't dare to resist. During the time she was adopted by the Tong family, she had developed a timid personality. It wasn't something that could be changed overnight. If this child could cry and shout that she was scared, but pick up a stool and hit people without hesitation, that would be the best. It was good to cry and hit people at the same time. Perhaps even if Tong Tong was abandoned, her life wouldn't be as miserable as it was now. "Do you have pocket money?" "A little. Very little." Tong Tong panted and said, "Every time, it's Dad who buys things for me and doesn't give me money." The economic foundation determined the construction of a building. Without money, it was useless to say anything. You have to save more money in the future. In fact, you can also earn money by selling mineral water bottles. In the future, if you pick up a mineral water bottle on the street, you can keep it secretly. Don't let your family or your classmates know. Children usually had strong self-esteem and were unwilling to show their lowly appearance in front of their classmates. In fact, Ning Shu had already abandoned this kind of insignificant face. "Okay, I got it." Tong Tong nodded. Obviously, she trusted Ning Shu a lot. She would do whatever Ning Shu said. Ning Shu sighed. When would Tong Tong be able to think for herself? When would she be able to distinguish right from wrong? When would she be able to understand what was not good for her? This will take a long time. Tong Tong was 9 years old now. Maybe when she was a little older, Tong Penghai would not let her learn anymore. At that time, it would be time for Tong Tong to harvest. In fact, what was in front of Tong Tong was a trap. Moreover, It was the only way out. If she left the Tong family, she would not be able to survive. Ning Shu had a headache. This kind of child's task was too difficult to do. He could deal with the Tong family in minutes, but he was stuck with Tong Tong. Tong Tong was the biggest problem. Tong Tong fell to the ground and rubbed her sore legs. Ning Shu waved his hand. This is the martial arts manual I gave you. Take a look and you can practice according to it. Is it the kind of martial arts manual on TV? Can I really master martial arts and become invincible? Tong Tong asked innocently. Ning Shu said, no, it can only strengthen your muscles and bones. Of course, if there is enough spirit chi, it can make you more powerful. It was possible to fly in the sky and burrow into the ground, but spirit chi was too scarce in the modern world. It was basically impossible. The natural law would not allow this to happen. That's not bad. Ning Shu asked Tong Tong to sit on the bed. He scanned Tong Tong's body with his spiritual power and then told her how to practice. She was also a child. If it were Tong Liang, he would have smashed something in her face and called her crazy. Tong Tong. Tong Pringhai started to howl again. Tong Tong had no choice but to stop. She jumped off the bed and said to Ning Shu, Angel, nothing has changed. As long as you practice hard every day, you will become very powerful. Ning Shu said. Confidence had to be built up little by little. Ning Shu felt that he had a terminal illness. In fact, this little girl was very happy. Although she was in the hospital all year round, there was almost no other misfortune in her life except for illness. Happiness was always similar, but misfortune was different. Some people lived in hell on earth. Ning Shu followed Tong Tong to the master bedroom to see what Tong Pringhai was up to. Tong Tong, Daddy needs to go to the bathroom. Help me. Tong Pringhai said. Ning Shu. What the fuck? He probably wanted to take advantage of the bathroom to expose his thing and molest the little girl. Some people have a hobby of exposing their thing. It's so disgusting. Tong Tong looked at Ning Shu helplessly. Ning Shu said, Don't help him. You said you can't help him. Call your brother. Tong Tong immediately said, Daddy, I'll call my brother. Then she ran out of the master bedroom and knocked on Tong Liang's room. Tong Liang was playing games in the room with headphones on. He knocked a few times but didn't open the door. He went to the kitchen to find Ding Chun. Mommy, Daddy said he needs to go to the bathroom. Ding Chun glanced at Tong Tong, wiped her hands on her apron and went to the master bedroom. Ning Shu, if there's anything in the future, call your mom, okay? He didn't believe that a woman could tolerate betrayal. In a sense, Tong Pringhai betrayed Ding Chun. Ding Chun didn't say anything, but it didn't mean she agreed. If she could find a way to separate the two of them, she would try her best. Ning Shu sighed and said to Tong Tong, Spend more time with your mother in the future. Try not to be alone with your brother and father. Tong Tong nodded. She drank some water and was about to go back to her room to practice martial arts when she heard Tong Pinghai's painful cry and Ding Chun's shrill scream. Tong Tong shivered. What's wrong now? She was really afraid that something would happen again. Ning Shu's lips curled up. There was such a big commotion outside, but Tong Liang's door still didn't open. Tong Tong went to the bathroom and saw Tong Pringhai and Ding Chun together. Ding Chun hurriedly pulled Tong Pringhai up, but Tong Pringhai was in so much pain that his eyes rolled back. /BK. Chapter 2357. Tong Pinghai's pants haven't been pulled up yet. Lying on the ground like this, Ding Chun pulled him up and pulled up his pants. Tong Tong was a little scared and asked, Mom, what happened? Ding Chun was annoyed and snapped at Tong Tong, Go back to your room, don't get close to your father, what are you doing? Tong Tong was so scared that she almost cried. She quickly ran back to her room, closed the door, touched her beating heart, and asked Ning Shu, Angel, do you know what happened? Ning Shu shook his head, I don't know, I've been talking to you. Hee, that's because Tong Pringhai knocked on the toilet. The bathroom floor was wet and very slippery. When Tong Pringhai went to the toilet, Ning Shu used his spiritual force. Tong Pringhai was already scalded and blistered. Now that he was knocked on the edge of the toilet, it's estimated that the pain of giving birth to a child is like this. Tong Penghai rolled his eyes in pain and then went into shock. Ding Chun was so scared that she quickly called the ambulance. When she was putting on Tong Penghai's pants, she touched the wound and Tong Penghai's body trembled and convulsed. The ambulance came and Tong Penghai was carried downstairs. Tong Tong looked at the movement outside through the crack of the door and saw her father being put on a stretcher. She asked in fear, "Will Dad be okay?" Tong Tong is afraid of Tong Penghai, but she also hopes that Tong Penghai is okay because Tong Penghai is the pillar of the family. Tong Liang came out of the room and saw the situation. He quickly asked, "What happened to Dad?" Ding Chun was very anxious. She took her bag and hurried to the ambulance, ignoring Tong Liang. "It's so annoying. What happened?" Tong Liang scratched his head and shouted at Tong Tong, "What are you doing in the room? What happened to Dad?" Tong Tong poked her head out of the door. "Brother, I don't know. Mom said that Dad fell in the bathroom." Then he slammed the door shut. "Cultivate, your father will be fine." Ning Shu comforted Tong Tong. Tong Tong nodded and sat cross-legged on the bed. After cultivating for a while, she stopped and asked doubtfully, "Is this really useful? Why can't I become more powerful?" Studying hard for 10 years is the same as practicing martial arts. It's not something that can be done in a short period of time. You have to do it day after day. Ning Shu felt that he was about to become a joke maker. "Oh, okay, but I'm worried about Dad," Tong Tong said. "Your father will be fine." That way, they wouldn't have time to harass him. In fact, Ning Shu had a bold idea. Tong Tong still wanted to say something, but Ning Shu's face darkened. Tong Tong immediately closed her eyes and began to cultivate. She followed Ning Shu's instructions and absorbed the spiritual energy. But what is spiritual energy? I can't feel it at all. Tong Tong asked doubtfully. Feel it carefully, even more carefully. By the time you can feel it, it will be the time when the divine skill is about to reach large success, Ning Shu said casually. In addition to cultivation, Ning Shu also wanted her to learn taekwondo and martial arts. Martial arts were more ruthless and attacked the weak points of a person. It was very likely that one move could kill. Ning Shu thought for a while and didn't teach martial arts. He called for some self-defense taekwondo and dangerous methods to prevent Tong Tong from accidentally killing someone. Although Tong Tong looked timid, when cornered, a cornered dog would jump over a wall, and a cornered rabbit would bite. Ning Shu felt that he was worrying too much. In the future, he really didn't want to take on such childish tasks. It was troublesome and there were too many things to consider. Tong Penghai, who had just been discharged from the hospital less than half a day ago, was now in the hospital again. At night, Ding Chun came back with a tired face. Tong Liang asked what happened. Ding Chun just said that it was nothing serious. When Tong Liang heard that it was nothing serious, he felt relieved and went back to his room to play games. He thought for a while and said to Tong Tong, "Let's go and play games with brother." Tong Tong quickly shook her head. "Brother, I don't know how to play games." To play games, they had to go to Tong Liang's room. Tong Liang felt that it was boring and didn't force her. Anyway, Dad was in the hospital and Mom had to accompany him. There were only the two of them at home. This series of things exhausted Ding Chun. She took the passbook from home and went to the hospital. Ning Shu also felt that since there was no one at home, it was suitable for doing bad things. When Tong Tong fell asleep at night, Ning Shu went through the wall and went to Tong Liang's room. Tong Liang was watching cat movies with headphones. His blood was boiling. Ning Shu picked up a cup of water and handed it to Tong Liang. Tong Liang had been looking at the computer screen. He took a sip and put it down. After a while, he realized that the cup was still floating in the air. He was so scared that he screamed. Ning Shu set up a barrier around the room. It was very soundproof. Tong Tong, who was next door, definitely couldn't hear anything. Tong Liang threw away his headphones and climbed out of bed. He wrapped himself in the quilt and shivered. He looked at the computer mouse moving in horror. The sound from the computer stereo was getting louder and louder. It hurt Tong Liang's ears. The ambiguous sound from the stereo still reached his ears. It was a sound that made people's blood boil, but Tong Liang felt that the blood in his body was about to freeze. Wave after wave of sound reached his ears. Even if he covered his ears, he couldn't do anything. He ran out of bed and wanted to open the door to escape. However, he couldn't open the door. When he finally opened the door, he hit the wall and bounced back. He sat on the ground. Tong Liang's face was full of fright. He screamed for help in horror and banged on the door. There was also a loud, ear-piercing sound from the stereo. It was a woman's coquettish voice and a man's panting. It was so ambiguous, but Tong Liang didn't dare to listen. He couldn't get out of the room and didn't know where to hide. He jumped back into bed and wrapped himself in the quilt, shaking like a sieve. Tong Liang's face was purple. It looked like he was scared out of his wits. His eyes rolled back and he fainted. Ning Shu lowered the volume of the computer and removed the barrier. He went through the wall and returned to Tong Tong's room. When Tong Liang woke up, the computer was still playing the cat movie. However, there was no ear-piercing sound. His headphones fell to the ground. Tong Liang quickly opened the door and found that he could go out again. Was it a dream? But the dream was too real. Tong Liang didn't dare to go back to his room. He curled up into a ball on the old sofa in the living room. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to come out again. Tong Liang couldn't tell the difference between reality and dream. He only hoped that he was dreaming. The next morning, Tong Tong went out of the room and saw her brother sleeping on the sofa. He was mumbling something about ghosts. He looked like he was in a trance and his face was haggard. "Brother, what's wrong?" Tong Tong patted Tong Liang. Tong Liang was so scared that his body trembled. He opened his eyes and saw Tong Tong. "What are you doing? You scared me." Tong Tong /BK. Chapter 2358. Tong Liang looked terrified. His face was pale and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked extremely haggard. He looked more like a ghost than Ning Shu. It was as if he had masturbated too much. Tong Tong didn't know what had happened. She asked, "Brother, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" "I'm fine. Go and cook." Tong Liang let out a long sigh. Although Tong Tong was a little confused, she still went to the kitchen to cook. Ning Shu looked at Tong Liang silently. Tong Liang rubbed his face, and then his body stiffened. He saw the fruit plate on the table move. The plate moved to the side of the coffee table and fell to the ground with a clang. The fruit rolled all over the floor. Tong Liang was so scared that his pupils shrank. He jumped up and rushed to the kitchen. He curled up and hid behind Tong Tong. He looked very funny. Tong Tong asked in surprise, "Brother, what's wrong with you?" "Tong Tong, I think there's a ghost in this house." A ghost threw the plate on the floor. Tong Liang said in a trembling voice. He hid behind Tong Tong and looked around. Tong Tong poked her head out of the kitchen and saw the fruit on the floor. "It's just a plate on the floor. What's the fuss about?" "Brother, you're too timid." It was probably the first time she saw her brother like this. Tong Tong actually teased him. Tong Liang's face darkened. "How dare you talk to me like this? You don't want to live anymore." Tong Tong lowered her head and started to cook. Tong Liang asked again, "Did you hear anything last night?" "No, it was very quiet." "Brother, what's wrong with you?" Tong Tong asked. She looked really confused. Tong Liang saw her like this and was extremely irritated. He looked very frightened and vented his anger on Tong Tong. "It's useless to ask you. What's the use of you?" Tong Tong didn't say anything. She could hear her brother mumbling about ghosts beside her. However, he was still in his youth. He was bold. He comforted himself that he was dreaming and that it was okay. His brain was muddled and he stayed up too late to play games. He would quit playing in the future. Tong Tong saw Tong Liang go crazy and then recover. She even asked Ning Shu, "Brother, what's wrong with her?" Ning Shu simply said, "She might be hysterical." Tong Tong cooked 2 bowls of noodles, but they weren't very tasty. Tong Liang ate them until he was burning with rage. He complained that Tong Tong couldn't have added some seasoning or something. The clear soup tasted terrible. Tong Tong pouted and didn't say a word. When Tong Liang returned to his room, Tong Ning Shu asked, "Do you want to eat something? I haven't seen you eat for so long. Aren't you hungry?" Ning Shu, "It's okay, I'm not hungry." Tong Tong returned to her room and began to cultivate under Ning Shu's request. She sat in a sitting position until her face was red and her whole body was sore. Tong Tong wanted to give up when she couldn't take it anymore, but Ning Shu told her to continue. If you're really tired, take a break. Tong Tong didn't even realize that Ning Shu was a ghost. Perhaps the image of an angel was deeply ingrained in her heart. And Ning Shu had never hurt anyone in front of Tong Tong. She was such a kind angel. She didn't realize at all that the ghost her brother was talking about was Ning Shu. At night, Ning Shu floated to Tong Liang's room again. In the middle of the night, Ning Shu turned on his computer and began to play cat movies. The sound was extremely ear-piercing. Tong Liang, who was sleeping in a daze, jumped out of bed in fright. The light from the computer screen shone on his face, which was pale and distorted. In the end, he screamed and got up. He opened the door and ran towards the door, but he couldn't get out. Tong Liang leaned against the wall and looked at the computer. The computer was still playing ambiguous scenes. There were even vulgar and disgusting scenes. There were also sounds that made people's blood boil. But in such a scene, it was extremely strange and terrifying. Ning Shu stood to the side and looked at Tong Liang's distorted face. Tong Liang and even if it was a ghost, it was too fucking teasing people. Tong Liang shrank into a ball and muttered curses in his mouth. It was said that swearing can scare away ghosts. The whole room was filled with deafening ambiguous sounds. Tong Liang trembled in pain and waited for the cat movie to end. But after this was over, Tong Liang breathed a sigh of relief. As a result, the screen began to play a horror movie. The sound effects of the horror movie were very scary. Tong Liang felt even more terrified. Especially the sound of the stereo was very loud. Those horrible sounds reached his ears. Coupled with all kinds of imagination, Tong Liang felt that there was an unknown thing squatting beside him. It even blew at him and stuck out its tongue to lick his face. Tong Liang was so scared that his eyes rolled back and he fainted. Ning Shu used his spiritual force to lift Tong Liang to the bed and covered him with a quilt. To be honest, using spiritual force, anything can be caused by spiritual force. Under the effect of spiritual force, it was like a supernatural time event. After doing this, Ning Shu turned off the computer, stretched, and floated back to Tong Tong's room. Tong Tong didn't hear the sound next door at all. She was sleeping very soundly. Ning Shu reached out and touched Tong Tong's face. His expression was solemn as he stared deeply out of the window, deep in thought. At dawn, Tong Liang woke up and rushed out of the room like a madman. He hugged his head and hid beside Tong Tong. Tong Tong, what's wrong with brother? Is he really hysterical like what the angel said? Did you hear anything last night? Did you hear anything? Tong Liang asked Tong Tong with an ashen face. Tong Tong was a little impatient. What, brother? I didn't hear anything. Do you think I should have heard something? It's the sound of a very loud movie. Are you deaf or what? How can you not hear such a loud sound? Tong Liang was angry. The fear in his heart made his face distorted, especially the acne on his face. He couldn't look at it now. Tong Tong was frightened by his appearance. No, I really didn't hear anything. Brother, are you hysterical? Get lost, you're the crazy one. Tong Liang pushed Tong Tong to the ground. Tong Tong didn't dare to say anything and got up on her own. Tong Liang looked at Tong Tong. Tonight, come to my room and sleep with me. Tong Liang was now eager to know if this kind of thing would happen when he was alone. Besides, one more person would embolden him. When Tong Tong heard this, she was frightened. Under the angel's explanation, she already knew that what her brother did to her was wrong. It was inappropriate. Now that she wanted to sleep, she immediately objected. I don't want to, brother. I don't want to sleep in the same room as you. In the past, her brother would knock on her door in the middle of the night. What are you thinking, stupid girl? Do you think I want you to sleep with me? You're dirtying my bed, you're just picking me up from the garbage dump. Tong Liang was furious. Because he didn't sleep well, his adrenaline was stimulated and his mood was very unstable. Chapter 2359. It wasn't that Tong Tong was really picked up from the garbage dump, but when Tong Pinghai adopted Tong Tong, Tong Tong's face was sallow and she was emaciated. Her clothes were very old and there was some dirt that couldn't be washed off. She looked like a child picked up from the garbage. When Tong Tong heard her brother's words, her body trembled. "Brother, are you too tired? There's no sound at all. Why don't you go to the hospital? Mom and Dad are in the hospital anyway. Get lost. You have to sleep with me tonight. Otherwise, I'll kick you out and let you sleep on the street. This is not your home," Tong Liang said ferociously. Tong Tong said, "Okay, brother, but we can also do it in the living room." "No, not in the room." Tong Liang's heart was beating like thunder. "I'm going to sleep. Don't disturb me." Tong Tong went back to the room and closed the door. She cried to Ning Shu and said, "What should I do now? Is brother trying to trick me into going to his room? He even made up something like a ghost." It was simply superstition. The more Tong Tong thought about it, the more she felt that her brother did it on purpose. Ning Shu only wanted to say that Tong Liang really didn't have the intelligence to do that. Using a haunted house to trick his younger sister into resting with him, at this time, he couldn't think of any tricks at all. He was really eager to find someone to test it on. "It's okay. You go. Didn't you learn some moves these 2 days? If there's really something, it's enough for you to escape," Ning Shu said. Tong Tong bit her lips and looked hesitant. "But if I hit brother will definitely ask Mom and Dad to throw me away and let me sleep in the garbage. They won't. Trust me," Ning Shu said. As for why not, think about it carefully. After all, she was only a 9-year-old child. Once she entered junior high school, she could choose to live in a school that was farther away from home. In short, he would do everything possible to prevent her from coming into contact with the father and son. However, as a parent, Tong Pinghai could stop Tong Tong from studying. In short, the future wasn't very bright. If she learned more and saw more, she might go out of Tong Pinghai's control. Tong Pinghai would never allow his adopted daughter to go out of control. He raised his prey and watched it grow day by day. Then it would be time to enjoy it. "Do you really want to go to my brother's room?" Tong Tong refused. Every time she saw her brother's strange eyes, she was scared. "I will protect you." That night, Tong Tong went to Tong Liang's room with a blanket and a pillow, wearing a long shirt and trousers. Tong Liang opened the door and let her in. Tong Tong covered herself with her own blanket. They each had their own blanket so that they didn't have to squeeze under the same blanket. Tong Liang and Tong Tong were lying on the bed. The room was very quiet. Tong Liang didn't dare to turn off the lights. The room was bright and a little dazzling. Tong Tong couldn't fall asleep either. She curled up into a ball under the blankets. Her body was stiff and wouldn't move. Anyway, the two of them waited and waited, but they didn't hear anything. Instead, they fell asleep sleepily. The sudden sound exploded in Tong Liang's ears, startling Tong Liang to sit up. He didn't know when the lights in the room went out, but the computer started playing again, making Tong Liang feel cold. Tong Tong, who was next to him, didn't seem to hear anything at all. She was still sleeping. Tong Liang wanted to stretch out his hand to wake Tong Tong up, but a ghost face suddenly rushed towards him. This ghost face was pale and blue, and it was bleeding from the 7 orifices. It grinned at him. Tong Liang rolled and crawled to the door. The result was obvious. Tong Tong was still sleeping on the bed. Tong Liang was shocked and angry. He didn't know where he got the courage from, but he actually rushed to the computer, grabbed it, and smashed it on the ground. The computer screen shattered. Tong Tong was awakened by the sound. She quickly turned on the lights and saw her brother panting heavily. He smashed the computer like a crazy person. She was shocked. "Brother, what happened to you?" Tong Liang showed a smile that wasn't a smile. His face twitched and he said neurotically, "I smashed the computer. Let's see what else you can play, hee hee." Tong Tong was horrified. She felt that she wasn't scared by a ghost. Instead, she was scared by her brother's appearance. Was her brother crazy? "Didn't you hear that loud noise?" Tong Liang asked the terrified Tong Tong. Tong Tong was confused. "No, I heard you smashing the computer. Then I woke up and saw you smashing the computer." Tong Tong saw Ning Shu standing at the head of his bed and sighed in relief. Thankfully, there was an angel by his side. It was not a ghost, but her brother had gone crazy. Don't look at me like that. I'm not crazy. Tong Liang felt that this was real, very real. Tong Tong hugged the blanket and didn't speak. Tong Liang sat on the ground weakly. Tong Liang sighed in relief. Without the computer, he wanted to see what the ghost was playing. Tong Liang laughed sarcastically. He didn't expect the ghost to be a pervert who liked to watch these kinds of movies. Tong Tong. He was seriously ill. It was almost dawn. The two slept soundly. Ning Shu heard the sound of the door opening and quickly woke Tong Tong up. Go back to your room. Ding Chun was back and was opening the door. Tong Tong didn't ask why. She picked up her blanket and pillow and went back to her room. Ding Chun tried several times but couldn't open the door. In the end, Ding Chun waited for Tong Tong to return to her room before opening the door. Tong Tong saw that it was already dawn and started to put on her clothes. Ding Chun opened the door and saw that her adopted daughter was putting on her clothes. Lock the door in the future. Tong Tong will earn money in the future and buy lots of clothes for mom. Tong Tong said to Ding Chun with a smile. Ding Chun was expressionless. She didn't seem to be affected by Tong Tong's words. She closed the door and went to her son's room. Tong Liang, what are you doing? Why did you smash the computer? Ding Chun screamed shrilly. Her voice was filled with fatigue and powerlessness. It sounded like a middle-aged woman's wail. It was angry and desperate. Don't tell anyone that you were in the same room with your brother last night, okay? Ning Shu said. At least, don't tell anyone. Tong Tong nodded. Mom, there's a ghost at home. There's really a ghost. Tong Liang saw his mother and immediately shouted, there's really a ghost. When I was sleeping, the computer automatically started playing a movie. I also saw a ghost face covered in blood. Ding Chun was already very tired. She was taking care of Tong Penghai in the hospital. When she came back, she saw that her stubborn son had even smashed the computer. Was it really because he couldn't beat her in games that he smashed the computer in anger? He even said that there was a ghost. Can't you watch less stimulating things? Are you dreaming? Ding Chun was too lazy to listen to her son. She prepared to take a shower and go to the hospital. Chapter 2360. Tong Liang saw that his mother didn't believe him, so he dragged her to a room and waited until night fell to find out what was going on. But last night, Tong Liang slept soundly and didn't wake up until he smashed the computer. He felt that the ghost was only targeting him. Tong Liang was furious. Did the ghost think that he was easy to bully, so it only bullied him? If this went on, Tong Liang felt that he might go crazy. He pulled his mother and said, Mom, there really is a ghost in our house. Think about it, how did Dad get into trouble? He was fine, but when he came home, he fell down and was sent to the hospital. It must be the ghost. We should find a master to eliminate the ghost. Tong Liang gritted his teeth and said, he was already angry from being teased by the ghost. Now, he didn't dare to watch the cat movie. He even felt that when he was watching it, there was a pervert beside him who was drooling and watching it with him. He didn't know if the pervert was a man or a woman, or if it was going to absorb his essence. Tong Liang thought about the ghost movies he had watched and all kinds of imagination. He swore that there was a ghost in this house. Ding Chun frowned. She did feel that the house wasn't peaceful recently. Could it be that they really got involved with something dirty? Her husband, Tong Penghai, was injured one after another. Now that her son said that there was a ghost, she decided to do a ritual to comfort him, so she decided to find a master to exorcise the ghost. Ding Chun didn't go to the hospital for the time being. Half a day later, she found a master. This master was a middle-aged man. He didn't wear an exaggerated Taoist robe. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand and a box of tools. He used the tools to sweep every corner of the house. Ning Shu just looked at this exorcism master silently. Master, how is it? Ding Chun asked. The master looked at the dispirited Tong Liang, who had dark circles under his eyes like a panda, and said, this young master is indeed haunted by something dirty. It waited until late at night and came out to cause trouble. There is also a yin chi in this house. Tong Liang saw that someone finally believed him and immediately shouted, "I said there was a ghost. There really is a ghost." "Master, what should we do?" Ding Chun asked worriedly. "Don't worry, I'll do a ritual." The master placed all kinds of props on the ground. He sat cross-legged and played with them like a juggler. Then he gave Tong Liang a bowl of talisman water. "Do you feel better now? The yin energy in your body has been removed," the master said. Tong Liang didn't know if it was a psychological effect, but he really felt that his body was much more relaxed. He said that he was much better. Ding Chun invited a relatively famous master. She spent a sum of money and pasted the talisman paper given by the master on the door of each room. Ning Shu stretched out his hand and tapped on the talisman on the door. He casually glanced at it. What was this drawing? Ordinary people wouldn't be able to understand it, so they just randomly drew it. This kind of paper was so dirty that it could even be used to wipe one's butt. The modern plane was in the age of chaos. With the dissipation of spirit chi, all the branches had declined and disappeared. The remaining ones had also become the dregs of feudalism. Ning Shu felt that using these methods to deal with an old ghost like him was almost impossible. Moreover, she was standing right in front of that master, but he couldn't even sense her presence. She didn't even have any basic skills. Ning Shu wanted to stir up trouble, but after thinking about it, he decided against it. There was no benefit in stirring up trouble like this. It was better to let Tong Tong be a quiet little invisible person in this house. After the master came to destroy the ghost, Tong Liang felt much better. He didn't have to worry about the computer suddenly lighting up at night. Speaking of the computer, Tong Liang's heart ached. How could he play games and watch movies when it was smashed? It was better not to watch movies. He always felt that something supernatural would happen when he watched movies. It scared him so much that he was about to wither. Ding Chun packed some things and was about to go to the hospital. She left some money on the table, saying that it was money to buy food for the two children. Tong Liang directly put away all the money, not leaving a single cent for Tong Tong. Tong Tong wanted it but didn't dare to ask. Ning Shu said, "Ask him. If you don't tell him, how will he know what you're thinking? If you don't want it, then treat it as if you don't need it." Tong Tong swallowed a mouthful of saliva. "Brother, give me some. I want to eat too." Tong Liang raised his eyelids and glanced at Tong Tong. "No. Brother, no." Scram. "Brother." Tong Liang was annoyed by Tong Tong. He took out 20 yuan from his pocket and threw it to Tong Tong. Tong Tong hurriedly held the money. Her eyes were shining. She ran back to her room, took out a money jar, and stuffed the money into it. Ning Shu saw that most of the coins inside were $1 coins. Some were 50 cents, while 20 yuan was considered a large amount. "Just tell me what you need. If you don't want what you deserve, then others will take it. If you don't have the ability to make others take the initiative to give it to you, then you have to fight for it yourself." Ning Shu not only said this to Tong Tong, but also to himself. Most of the people in this world didn't have the soul of Confucianism and got the disease of Confucianism. They used a magnifying glass to pick on other people's faults, especially when it came to interests. Even if you were fighting for your own legitimate interests, when it came to money, you would fiercely attack others. Tong Tong nodded and was immersed in the joy of getting so much money from her brother. 20 yuan was only a small amount. Ning Shu saw that Tong Liang had a lot of money on him. Tong Liang thought that after killing the ghost and smashing the computer, he would definitely be able to sleep well. However, in the middle of the night, the phone at the bedside started to ring. Tong Liang. "Fuck, is there an end to this?" The phone floated up. For some reason, the volume of the phone was frighteningly loud. It was the same as the volume of the computer. Then, Tong Liang felt a heavy object pressing down on his body. It was very, very heavy. His body couldn't move. Tong Liang was extremely frightened. Could it be that a ghost was pressing down on him? It felt like a pair of hands were caressing his body. It was bone-chilling, causing goosebumps to appear all over Tong Liang's body. He struggled and screamed, but no one heard his voice. The clothes and pants on his body were taken off one by one. These clothes floated in the air. The pair of invisible but cold hands were caressing his body. Tong Liang felt like he had fallen into an ice cellar. Fear seemed to drown him. Could it be that this pervert was interested in watching porn and wanted to do something to him? He was raped by a ghost. Ning Shu stood aside and used his mental strength to control Tong Liang. He saw Tong Liang's frightened expression. The fear in Tong Tong's heart was the same as the fear in Tong Liang's heart. This father and son were similar to the devil. Tong Liang was pressed down and couldn't move. He felt that every part of his body had been touched. An invisible ghost was touching him with a ferocious face. Tong Liang was so scared that his eyes rolled back and he fainted. He put on Tong Liang's clothes and carefully covered him with the quilt. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.